morning and welcome to the Landmarks Preservation Commission's public hearing and public meeting of July 30th. We'll begin this morning by taking attendance, and I'll ask our Deputy Counsel John Weiss to call the roll.
Chair Carroll.
Here.
Vice Chair Bland. Vice Chair Bland. He's not here.
You there, Greg?
No. Okay. Commissioner Chapin. Oh, yeah. Commissioner Chen. Commissioner Chu.
Here.
Commissioner Ginsburg. Here. Commissioner Goldblum.
Here.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Here.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Here.
Commissioner Master.
All right, good morning and welcome again to the public hearing and public meeting of the Landmarks Preservation Commission. Today, the public hearing is being held in our public hearing room on the 9th floor of 1 Center Street. It is also being held via Zoom for anyone who would like to participate remotely. And it is being live streamed on our YouTube channel if you would just like to watch the proceedings. And we have an agenda today that includes public hearing items for new applications for work on designated properties. And we have 2 items that are on our public meeting agenda that were previously read into the record. And we will be opening up the hearing today to allow the applicants to present and take testimony. And with that, I will turn it over to our Director of Preservation, Corey Harala.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. Good morning. Thank you, Sarah, and good morning, everyone. We'll start today's Preservation Department agenda with public hearing item number 1, LPC 24-11791. This is an application for an advisory report. It's in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1111, Lot 1. Harlem, Meer, and the Central Park Scenic Landmark. This is an English Romantic style public park designed by Frederick Law Olmsted and Calvert Vaux, built in 1857 to 58. The application is to establish a master plan governing the future modifications to the shoreline and pathways and the installation of a ramp and a boardwalk.
Great. Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Nick Coster. I'm the Vice President for Design at the Central Park Conservancy. And today we're presenting the restoration of the Harlem Meer Shoreline Master Plan. Next slide, please. This project is located in the northeast corner of Central Park and will be continuation of the work that the Conservancy currently has under construction for the replacement of the Lasker Pool and Ice Skating Rink with the new Harlem Meer Center. The Harlem Meer Center was presented to the Commission back in 2019. Next. We're happy to report that the work is progressing nicely and that the Harlem Meer Center will be opening to the public next year. Next slide, please. The primary goals of this project are a continuation of the goals that were established for the first phase of the shoreline restoration, including the continued restoration of the Meer shoreline to its historic character, supporting wildlife habitat, and improving park-wide access to the water body and park programs. Next. The location of the park where the Meer is located from 106th Street to 110th Street was added to the footprint of the park's original plan through the advocacy of the park's designers, Olmsted and Vaux, in order to incorporate the existing natural features of this area into the park's northern edge. This early park photograph highlights the Meer's natural edge along its north shore with open views and water access. Next. Up through the 1930s, the Meer shoreline remained relatively unchanged. This photograph is from the 20s, illustrating the rock outcroppings along the southern shore that form the Meer's edge condition. Next. In the middle of the 20th century, the character of the Meer changed considerably through a series of Parks Department projects, including the addition of a shoreline perimeter path, concrete retaining wall, perimeter fence, and a boathouse structure built on the north side of the water body. Next. In the mid-60s, the Lasker Pool and Rink facility was constructed, which further reduced the footprint of the Meer. Next. In the 1980s image of the Harlem Meer demonstrates the decline of this area of the park, which was one of the first areas focused on by restoration by the Central Park Conservancy. Next. Our restoration work included naturalizing the edge of the Meer, construction of the Dana Center, and other improvements, including playground restorations to the area. Next. I'm going to quickly walk through a series of photographs starting in the southeastern cove that will highlight the existing conditions in a counterclockwise direction to the northwest corner of the Meer. Next, please. The existing hardscape conditions around the Meer reflect the work done in the early 1990s by the Central Park Conservancy, which included reconstructing the shoreline path around the Meer. Next. The shoreline plantings also reflect the 90s work, with some portions having been naturalized. Next. Since the 1990s, some small sections of the path have been reconstructed, and those were in conjunction with work at the East 110 and East 108 playgrounds to create accessibility to the programs. Next. At the shoreline, invasive plants, primarily Phragmites, have found a foothold in recent years and will need to be removed. Next. In other areas of the shoreline are lacking aquatic edge planting. Next. There are also landscapes that have been compacted and degraded over time. And next. Yep, right here, thank you. The southwestern portion of the Meer up to the drive, which is highlighted in white, this is the first section of the shoreline that is currently being restored as part of the Conservancy's work for the Harlem Meer Center. And this plan is here shown with the former Lasker pool and rink in the aerial. Next. This rendered plan shows the final configuration for the Harlem Meer Center boardwalk and South Shoreline. The Meer restoration work that we're sharing with the Commission today will encompass the entire remainder of the shoreline. As highlighted, the work will be completed in phases to maintain public access to much of the Meer as possible, and we've broken that down into 5 sections. And I'll start with the northwest accessibility and path restoration and proceed clockwise around the Meer. Next. Before looking at each section in greater detail, the Conservancy's goal with the restoration of any program within the park is to make the program accessible from the closest drive or perimeter entrance. With the phased restoration of this project, the plan illustrates that once all shoreline segments are reconstructed, all public programs around the Meer will be accessible to each other. Next. So we've prepared each section of the restoration with an existing conditions plan, which you see here, reflecting the conditions established as part of the 90s work, an overlay of the proposed work, and then also a side-by-side with the historic as-built drawings. Next. So the high-level scope of work, and this is for each section, includes reconstructing the paths, removing the invasive plants, and replacing them with new aquatic plantings, updating lighting, infrastructure, and upgrading the benches. Specific to this section, the park path will be realigned and reconstructed to create an accessible route to the new Harlem Meer Center facility from 110th Street as well as from the drive. Next. This area of the park, it's, as you can see, has had various alignments through its history. Next. This is a section of the accessible path, and so that is going to create an accessible route to the new Harlem Meer Center. So the design solution for this path is the same as the accessible path that was constructed for the Dairies Visitor Center in the southeast corner of park. The existing grading, the mature oak, which you see in this rendered section, and the need for vehicular access to the Harlem Meer Center necessitated this design solution of a path with an adjacent ramp. Next, we're providing a photograph of this location. It's currently within the construction site for the Harlem Meer Center. Next. So the materials palette for the path restoration work is typical to the Central Park palette. It includes asphalt paths, granite block curbs, black painted handrails, granite steps. In the bottom left is a photograph of the dairy accessible path, illustrating what this path will look like when constructed. Next. So the next section of the North Shoreline, in addition to the plans, we've also prepared a series of sections to explain the proposed modifications to the existing shoreline that we'll go into after the plan comparison. Next. So the park path along the North Shoreline is going to be realigned and regraded to make it fully accessible, as well as create a full accessibility at 2 Meer Shoreline access points. In addition, the Meer Shoreline is going to be expanded by removing a strip of upland area currently covered with invasive plants and restoring it with new aquatic and shoreline plantings. Next. You can see in the side-by-side that in this location, historically, there was a path and program access to the water's edge. Next. The first section illustrates the invasive aquatic vegetation. Next. In this location, the Meer footprint is going to be expanded to create an aquatic edge by lowering the existing grade. Next. At the western access point, the cross slope is too steep to be accessible. Next. The path will need to be pulled inland in this location to create an accessible cross slope. Next. In this location at the water's edge, the accessible segment will have a raised granite curb. Next. To allow for accessibility. Next. So moving towards the Dana Center to the east. Next. An aquatic shelf will be added in this location. And next. At the east side of the Dana Center, which is the second Meer overlook section. Next. An exposed aggregate paving is going to be installed that's accessible, as well as a flush granite curb or the flush granite curb will be replaced with a raised one. Next. So moving on to the east shoreline. This is adjacent to the restoration work that had been done prior for some of the playgrounds leading up to Duke Ellington Circle. And some of these paths were restored and benches during that reconstruction. Next. West of Duke Ellington Circle and south of the playground, we're going to be repaving the path. And additionally, the existing shoreline beach is going to be repaired and stabilized. Next. Here's a side-by-side illustrating those proposed modifications without the cut line. Next. Along the shoreline section, Phragmites are going to be removed and replaced with aquatic planting. Next. And next. So moving down, so adjacent to the east shoreline, we have the South Seats Cove. This is right next to and above the Conservatory Garden. Next. Within this area, the shoreline path to the west is going to be realigned and regraded to create an accessible connection from Fifth Avenue to the Conservatory Garden and around to the Meer shoreline path. Next. And in this side-by-side comparison of the three plans, one thing to note is that the path along the southern edge of the Meer, that was something that was installed as part of the 1940s parks perimeter work, hardening the edge. Next. So finally, this is our last segment of the master plan. This is the South Shoreline, which will be a continuation of the boardwalk. Next, please. So in this area, sections of fill that were added in the 1940s will be excavated and the path will be replaced with the boardwalk over the Meer. Next. This work, as I mentioned, is a continuation of the boardwalk and shoreline work that is being currently completed as part of the Harlem Meer Center. The first segment of which is currently under construction and will open next year. Next. This is the side-by-side showing what the historic condition was, the build condition from the 40s that continued into the 90s and the proposal for the boardwalks. Next. So this section illustrates the fill and wall that were added by the Parks Department in the 40s. Next. The proposed construction of the boardwalk will expose the rock outcroppings and will be also installing aquatic plantings in this location consistent with the historic design of the park. Next. The materials of the boardwalk is composed of an accessible galvanized steel boardwalk, gray painted handrails with a stainless steel mesh and an outwardly facing wood fascia board. Next. This is a perspective of what the experience will be like walking east on the boardwalk. And next. And finally, a side-by-side photograph of the boardwalk showing that it maintains the existing connectivity around the Meer, which was established, as I mentioned, in the mid-20th century with the boardwalk really revealing and highlighting Olmsted and Bach's original design intent for this area of the park. And that concludes our presentation.
Thank you so much. Do we have any questions, commissioners? Yes, Commissioner
I have a
Jefferson.
quick, I'm curious, this is a big pond, how many how many streams feed this thing? Do you know?
Just one. Yeah, so the, as part of the Harlem Meer Center, which is, the project, which is the first phase, the Conservancy reestablished the, connection from, the lake to the loch of the Meer. So it's a water body that starts south, filters down through the north end, and will come into the Meer.
Right, other questions? We'll move to public testimony. We might have other questions after that. And we have one person who's signed in person, Jeremy Woodoff.
Good morning, I'm Jeremy Woodoff, and I'm speaking for Frederick Law Olmsted, because somebody must. In 1883, Olmsted published an essay called The Spoils of the Park. In it, he castigated the Tweed Ring and subsequent corrupt and ignorant administrations for spending vast sums in the park on projects incompatible with its original design, while failing to maintain its structures and landscape. The criticisms remained valid for more than 80 years. Then, in 1966, Henry Hope Reed was appointed the park's first curator. The long task of restoring the park was begun. A laser focus was maintained on this vision to restore and conserve the original design, what Olmsted and Vaux called their single work of art. In the 1990s, the lost pastoral Harlem Meer landscape was restored. The water edges were softened and planted. Soft paths of stone screenings were laid on the south shore, so visitors could again have this historic and once ubiquitous experience. At other paths, cobblestone swales and gutters replicated historic path edges. The visitor gazes across the Meer to uninterrupted views of the rocky landscape to the south and west, as they were meant to do, and to the lovely neo-Victorian Dana Center to the north. But recent projects, including this one, demonstrate that the Central Park Conservancy is losing its way. It's neglecting the maintenance of buildings and landscapes. It has become a capital projects machine, spending vast sums on projects that are all too often at odds with the designer's precepts. It's ignoring the sound advice of this commission in projects like the Kinderberg. It seems to have forgotten that in Central Park, we are conserving a work of art, not a work of nature. The question you must ask about the Harlem Meer is this: are the steel structures, boardwalks, modernistic railings with metal mesh, and raised engineered curbs compatible with the pastoral and naturalistic design? No, they are not. These designs will damage this carefully restored landscape. They reflect either a profound misunderstanding of or a deliberate disregard for the historic landscape and the way paths were designed to be an unobtrusive, nearly invisible guide as the visitor moves through it. LPC has the mandate and expertise to protect our historic scenic landmarks. During the 20 years I was on the LPC staff, I watched the commission play a strong role in guiding and supporting the park's restoration through its regulatory powers. This proposal must not leave LPC in this form. If you send it to PDC, it will get a rubber stamp approval. That's what happened at the Kinderberg. Talk to the Parks Commissioner. Talk to the president of PDC. Tell them why the project is inappropriate and must be redesigned. Thank you.
All right, and I'll note that there is no one else in the room to speak on this item, so I will turn it over to Gregory Kalla to see if we have any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. If you would like to speak on this item, please click the raise hand button now so I can see you. Okay, and the first person we'll be hearing from is Blair Walsh from the New York Landmarks Conservancy. Blair Walsh, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Carroll and Commissioners. I am Blair Walsh speaking today on behalf of the New York Landmarks Conservancy. Proposed changes to the Harlem Meer are tasteful and attractive by 2024 standards. They will be easily identifiable as having been designed at this particular moment in time, reflective of both contemporary aesthetics and the park's current needs. There will be no question that the boardwalk with mesh paneled railings that cantilevers over aquatic grasses are a modern design. We question whether such a dramatic approach is wholly appropriate for a scenic landscape of Central Park's caliber. Each time we introduce a modern intervention to the park, we wear away at the impressive original design. Past projects at the park have successfully struck the sensitive balance between preserving Central Park's design intent and modernity. This proposed project wraps around the Dana Discovery Center on the Harlem Meer. The 1993 Discovery Center is a perfect example of a modern improvement executed in a style that complements Olmsted and Vaux's vision for the park. Sustainability and accessibility enhancements to the parks are necessary and important. The park will also have future needs that we cannot yet anticipate. We hope that preservation of one of the most important landscapes in our country will also be a top priority for all future projects in Central Park. Thank you for the opportunity to share the Conservancy's views.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we'll be hearing from Christina Conroy from the Victorian Society, New York. Christina Conroy, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Christina Conroy for the Victorian Society, New York. Now, there are 4 very problematic aspects to this proposal. First, the soft surface paths on the south side of the Meer should not be removed. These rustic walks added in the early 20th century were restored in the mid-1990s, and they are a delight. They allow visitors to have a unique visual and tactile landscape experience typical of the park in the 19th century, and the surface is ADA compliant. On other paths, cobblestone gutters are a historic park feature and should not be replaced with raised granite curbs that have a more engineered edge. The second problem is the extension of the boardwalk with its steel structure and modernistic railings. Extending this mistake around the rest of the south edge of the Meer would compound the error of its use near laser rink. These proposed walks are typical of a modern nature preserve. In Central Park, however, we are conserving a historic work of art, not a work of nature. Original park walks were intended to be invisible. When the visitor looks over the landscape, they disappear. And this is exactly how the existing paths around the Meer work. The proposed boardwalks will be visible from all over, including from above and from across the lake. This will be intrusive and spoil the artistic natural effect of the lake edge. Third, more creative solutions are needed for providing universal access. The addition of asphalt and railings to the already wide and straight walks will degrade the character of the park for everyone. Now, fourth is a component of the project not on this hearing. It is the proposed filtration system. This part of the project was reviewed by community boards, but has been removed for staff approval. We protest this decision. It's a massive project that includes many above-ground intrusive features and will require extensive disruptive evacuation and excavation and construction. Work of this magnitude and consequence deserves review by the public and the commissioners. The commission should require the applicant to make changes to the Meer design before it votes on a report. Afterwards, the applicant has no incentive to make changes. The result can be seen at Kinderberg, where important changes the commissioner requested were ignored by the Conservancy and the Public Design Commission. The picture of the unfortunate result in our written a picture of that unfortunate result is in our written testimony, along with other pictures illustrating these comments. Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we'll be hearing from Megan Fitzpatrick from Landmark West. Megan Fitzpatrick, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. Okay, and once you are a panelist, please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. Megan Fitzpatrick speaking on behalf of Landmark West. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee appreciates that the Central Park Conservancy is continuing its work to make most areas of the park ADA compliant and amending some of its prior decisions by replacing invasive plant species with a more diverse set of plantings. However, our committee believes that if incremental elements must be added to the park, that they serve an essential purpose and should be consistent with the design and naturality of the Olmsted and Vaux Park. The proposed boardwalk at the south shoreline is inconsistent with the original design intent of the park. Boardwalks like these are more appropriate at nature reserves than a Victorian-style urban park. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we'll be hearing from Zainab Tehran from the Friends of the Upper East Side. Zainab Tehran, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Carroll, Commissioners. My name is Zainab Turan for the Friends of the Upper East Side. Friends Preservation Committee appreciates the Central Park Conservancy's proposal to establish a master plan to guide the future modifications to the Harlem Meer shoreline. Our Preservation Committee does not object to proposed modifications such as the creation of ADA, accessible paths, or the installation of granite curbs at the water's edge. We applaud the planting of native aquatic plant species and removal of invasive plants. We do, however, question the installation of a galvanized steel boardwalk with steel railings that would extend over the water near the southern shoreline of the Meer. We believe this deviates too sharply from Olmsted's vision for a naturalistic landscape design, and we urge the applicants to reconsider this aspect of the proposal. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we'll be hearing from Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. Lucy Levine, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. We'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. HDC is glad the Central Park Conservancy is undertaking restoration of the Meer and supports most aspects of this proposal. However, we find the continuation of the floating contemporary boardwalk to be inappropriate and unfortunate. The natural edge of the park is meant to be read from the other side of the Meer. This boardwalk introduces an alien structure into the landscape. We wonder why this is necessary and note that Olmsted and Vaux never included such a walkway in their original design. Given the extraordinary restoration of the Meer that has already occurred and its approach of restoring the Meer's forms and details in accordance with Olmsted and Vaux' original intent, we wonder why the Conservancy does not simply eliminate this path from the composition and from this project. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I do not see any additional hands raised, so I will note for the record that we received letters recommending approval from Manhattan Community Board 7, Manhattan Community Board 8, Manhattan Community Board 10, Manhattan Community Board 11, and Manhattan Community Board 5. We also received another letter from an individual recommending mixed approval. And with that, I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Thank you, Gregory. Would you like to respond to the comments we've heard?
Sure, yeah. So, I think to kind of lump the comments into categories, we appreciate the comments we've received regarding naturalizing the edge and accessibility, with the paths and expansion of asphalt. I think the goal is really to maintain the widths of existing paths, and the curb and edge work that is being done is removing work that was installed largely in the 1990s. To respond to the boardwalk, so the commission had supported the idea of a boardwalk under the previous review, and that application that we're presenting today continues the same intent. We'd like to reiterate that the boardwalk design is a light touch that preserves the current circulation while reestablishing a connection between the water and the rock outcropping that had previously existed when the park was designed. And it's also it also allows for the public to have a much more direct experience with the water without the barrier of a boat. This is a water body that is too small for regulatory boating today. So we feel that it provides that. Sandy, is there anything else you'd like to add? Okay, great.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, any final questions? All right, let's move to our discussion then. Commissioner Jefferson, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So move.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion on this advisory report, which involves making modifications to the paths and edge conditions around the Harlem Meer to provide accessibility and separate, in some cases, vehicular traffic from the pathways. And it also includes restoring the shoreline on the south and doing in the place of the current paths, boardwalks over the water, which continue the boardwalks that we wholeheartedly approved in the previous application for the Harlem Meer Center. So we'll begin our discussion now. Commissioner Chu, would you like to start this one?
Sure. I wasn't a part of the approval of the previous boardwalk condition. It seems to me that most of the moves that were being done, this is really being driven by accessibility and retaining essentially the existing circulation experience around the Meer. I think that most of the moves seem acceptable to me. The one area I think was also commented earlier, the finishes of the ramp main access from the northwest corner from the image did look like potentially could be improved. Looked like a mix between asphalt and concrete along that path. In terms of the boardwalk condition, which I think is really the only element here proposed that seems that there's some opposition to. It's a tricky condition. Essentially, what the proposal is doing is bringing back the historic condition of the water's relationship to the outcropping, which it seems that with time has been added a path in front of it. This would now retain that path, but make it completely accessible around the water's edge. My feeling is that in terms of circulation and flow, what's being proposed is appropriate. A lot of these paths, I think, ultimately become inaccessible due to just their paving and time and wear and tear. And I think that is a very important aspect of this project, which is really making the Meer as accessible as possible. I will comment that, and I'd like to hear my fellow commissioners' thoughts on this. Again, the aesthetics of it, it is very modern and doesn't try to be something that looks like it's historic in terms of guardrails. The implementation of it, I think, from what I understand, is quite level with the existing path. So from across the water's edge, the difference would be potentially seeing that mesh guardrail there. I guess my reaction to it is, in terms of a finish, I could have seen maybe some introduction of wood in the detailing, but otherwise, I don't have any big objections to the moves being made. I think that if we eliminated this, it may be hard to get any accessible path along the water's edge.
Commissioner Jefferson.
I agree with most of the comments from my fellow commissioner. The boardwalk is the issue. And I think the boardwalk is important because it gives a different perception not a 19th century perception, but a different perception of the water's edge in a modern way. I could question the materials that are used. I mean, they're modern, but they're trivially modern. They're not excitingly modern. And you could go either way. You could become more historical, put a log or something on it. But you could maybe soften it a bit. But I think the approach, the thinking, conceptual thinking of that is wonderful. And I think this park can absorb that.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the other areas of the proposal seem acceptable to me, although I think Stephen's right that they could consider upgrading the materials at the ramp or at the entrance to the northwest corner. But I think in terms of the boardwalk, I look at it from two perspectives. Number one, this path that was there that provided for one to be able to completely walk around the water at more or less water's edge was not original. The original intent was to have the pathways up on top, higher up in this area, which so in a way, this is similar to a lot of other things that we've seen from the Conservancy, where they're trying to kind of take the long view, which is that the park has evolved since Olmsted and Vaux, and there are certain aspects of that that are positive and should be retained, and certain that should be pulled back. So I think that the notion of a waterside promenade that is completely encircling the pond is a post Olmsted and Vaux innovation that is reasonable to maintain. Once you accept that, once I accept that, I think that their decision to restore the connection between the water and the rock, and to make that more visible and experienceable to the public, is a reasonable trade-off to the clearly visually new innovation of the boardwalks and the railings associated with them. So I think it's an interesting and very modern concept that both steps back to Olmsted and Vaux, preserves the later innovation of the walkway all the way around, and then comes the second aspect of it. It ties into the nature center or the recreation center that we approved a while ago, which is a frankly overtly modern construction, as was its predecessor. So I think that the idea of tying something materially back to that focus point, which is a very important aspect of the design and experience of the Meer, is again an appropriate connection. So while I understand the comments and sympathize with them, I think that the option of removing that walkway going all the way around the pond is something worth preserving, even though it was a post Olmsted innovation. And I think this way is an interesting way of kind of stepping back to the Olmsted while preserving it and tying it into the new stuff.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg.
So I agree with my fellow commissioners, and there are just two things. I think creating handicapped accessibility is really important, and it's often tricky, particularly in this area, which is quite hilly, which means you need, and I agree also that the path circumnavigating the water is even though not original, is a good thing. And once you get there, I think the boardwalk and pulling it out so one sees the stones is good. And that then it's appropriate to be a modern insertion, because if it was trying to make it a Victorian insertion, it would be implying that it was original, and we know it wasn't original. And I also, having looked at this issue, that the stainless steel mesh is as minimal as you can get to get a required guardrail and largely disappears, not totally, but largely. And as much as I would love to see wood, I also understand their major maintenance issues and that this seems like a reasonable and appropriate approach.
Commissioner Lutfi.
So I'm in agreement with my fellow commissioners on this. First, I would like to say, I always think it's a great idea to pull together a master plan that can provide guidance with how to address an issue, which in this case is accessibility, which is very important today in all public spaces throughout the city. We have more people here. The park also has had a lot of access over time. Nature has had an impact on the grade, the waterfront, et cetera. So all of this kind of work is extremely important. I think the proposal is very thoughtful. And as you know, I've heard from the other commissioners, it's a little difficult to do some of these insertions without having them look and feel slightly different or different from what was there. But this is an insertion, again, with a particular purpose. And again, aid access. And I believe that the plan has been done in a very thoughtful and understated way. I happen to agree about the idea of doing the boardwalk with wood. I think over time, it would not wear well. And having experienced this myself personally, so I'm okay with it. And I appreciate, you know, the regrading that has been done here. I appreciate the thoughtfulness about the ecological impact and the aquatic environment. So, you know, nothing can be perfect. And I think it works.
All right, great. So I think we have a consensus to support. I think we can ask them to continue to study the paving materials at the ramp at the northwest corner entrance. But otherwise, make a motion to support it. Commissioner Chu, would you make the motion?
Regarding LPC 24-11-791 Central Park Harlem Meer Scenic Landmark, an English romantic style public park designed by Frederick Law Olmsted and Calvert Lowe and built in 1857 to 1859. Application is to establish a master plan governing future modifications to the shoreline and pathways and the installation of a ramp and a boardwalk. I recommend that a favorable report be issued finding that the modifications to the pathway system and limited expansion of paving in select areas will improve barrier-free access and enhance the visitor's experience by increasing public access to the waterfront without eliminating or damaging any significant historic, architectural, or landscape features. That the limited non-restorative changes to the footprint of the shoreline and replacement of new pathways is harmonious with the historic design and will also improve circulation and the support of protection of ecological sensitive areas. That the slight shifting and widening of the existing pathway and regrading will help provide the minimum clearances necessary for barrier-free access path and a pathway which can be accessed by emergency vehicles. That the paired pathways, when seen at a distance, will visually recall the appearance of a typically single pathway, thereby helping them to remain a discrete presence in the landscape vistas. That the proposed benches and railings will be typical of furnishings used throughout the scenic landmark in terms of materials, design, details, and finishes, that the proposed work will not eliminate any mature trees or obstruct any prominent vistas, that the introduction of a boardwalk featuring neutral materials and finishes will only occupy a small percentage of the shoreline at the edge of the Harlem Meer, and will encourage and enhance public use of the section of the park by permitting greater access to the water's edge. That the establishment of a master plan will perform the work in phases over an extended period of time. Will help support a cohesive design and provide sufficient time for a construction project of this scale.
And as they continue to develop the plans, they'll study the paving at the northwest corner entrance in consultation with the staff. All right, Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
Second,
All right, John, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Jefferson,
aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
6 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
That's approved. Thank you. We'll move to the next item.
The next item is public hearing item number 2, LPC 24-09992. An application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 515, lot 15, 65 to 83 West Houston Street in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. This is a commercial building designed by Buyer Blender Bell, built in 1982, and the application is to paint portions of the facades.
Okay, just wanted to make a brief statement. I represent the owner. My name is Bob Esnard. I wanted to describe how we got here. We have been here 40 years ago, and we got here because we're real estate. I represent the real estate company owners, and basically what happened was 40 years ago, we thought we'd build a nice little taxpayer, 1-story, 2-story retail office space. And it'd be very simple, bearing wall building, reinforced concrete precast planks for the floor and the roof. And then we realized it was a landscape, it had to be approved by the Landmarks Preservation Commission. And we actually then hired Binder and Bell, and we wound up getting something special. And it was architecture. It became more than just a simple building that we're hoping to make money on. We did, and it was a very successful building. Successful in 2 ways. One, economically, which of course is the bottom line for us, but the second thing was it had an aesthetic component to it that was kind of interesting, considering how modest this building was. So for 40 years, we really have only had one problem, and that problem is graffiti. From the day even before we opened the building had graffiti on it. And so these 40 years off and on, we've been dealing with it in a hopefully a very positive way to try to save the building at the same time and discourage graffiti, something that I think is a problem everywhere in the city. And that last year and a half, it became so bad, we were worried about the facade itself. We came here to Landmarks Preservation Commission, talked to some staff people, and basically they suggested that we have to change the approval if we wanted to do something different. That instead of just cleaning it and trying to take off the graffiti as it occurred. So that what they suggested, we hire a conservation consultant, and we went and looked at 4 different firms, and basically came down to the Jablonski Building Conservation Inc. And that we got to meet Helen Thomas Haney, who is a terrific lady, a principal at the firm. And what she did was in 6 months, did a little study for us, put together all the things that we tried to do, and then figured out through a whole series of tests, what would be the easiest way and best way to answer a problem. And I think she and we have come out with something that makes sense, because the way we're talking about it, we just paint graffiti, and we paint graffiti where the graffiti artist interfaces with our building. So that's it. And with that, I give you Helen, who's put a very logical argument together that we're very proud of. Okay.
Okay, for the record, my name is Helen Thomas Haney. Next slide, please.
6583 West Houston Street is located on the northern edge of the Soho Cast Iron District. It is on Lot 15 on Block 515 on the corner of West Houston Street to the north and Wooster Street to the east. It is 9 bays long across West Houston Street and 1 bay wide along Wooster Street. It was completed in 1984 and designed by the architecture firm Beyer Blinder Bell. Next slide. The building is constructed of 8-inch load-bearing CMU blocks as highlighted in the section drawing on the left. The blocks are all 8 inches high, but with different depths and lengths. The table in the middle shows the unique shapes that were used to construct the facade. False joints were scored into the longer blocks to simulate the appearance of an 8 by 8 inch square block, and both the true and simulated joints were then filled with a Type S mortar. Next. The most notable feature of the building is its polychromed appearance. Original drawings call out the colors of the glazed CMU block. The main body of the building is composed of deep hemlock green with deep astral blue window surrounds on the second floor. The base and block around the openings on the ground floor are colored special black. The multicolored cornice contains deep Sierra red in the upper dentil, special black in the frieze, and deep astral blue in the lower dentil. Next slide. Almost immediately after construction, the building has been tagged with graffiti. The building's location along West Houston Street, with its flat, relatively blank surface, has made it an ideal canvas. In the first years, the landlord's maintenance staff regularly removed the graffiti themselves. However, in the 90s, the owner hired a graffiti removal company to professionally remove it. All of the invoices, some only a year apart, describe the work as removing the graffiti from the green and black block and sealing with an anti-graffiti coating. The invoices also provide for a free cleaning within 1 year of service, though it is unclear how often that was performed. Next slide. After 30 or so years of constant graffiti removal, the surface of the blocks have become damaged. The image on the screen is a Google image from 2014. Level with the roll-down gate enclosures, you can see the darkened blocks from the anti-graffiti coating. And below that, the effects of the continual graffiti is clear, the effects of the continual graffiti cleaning is evident. The blocks appear hazed, streaked, and uneven. Next slide. Upon close examination, the damage is more apparent. Originally, the blocks had smooth surfaces, which are still intact at the second floor and cornice. However, surface erosion and gouges are visible through the paint and the blocks at the ground level. Some of these gouges appear to be lettering, as shown in the first image from the left. It is possible that this damage is the result of the graffiti removal process or acts of vandalism themselves. The image on the right shows 3 pock marks in the surface of a green block. As you can see, the color is only present in the outer few millimeters of the surface. Some of the damage under the paint may be deep enough to have exposed the non-pigmented body of the block. Next slide. For the past 7 years, some tenants have tried to address and deter graffiti themselves. The ground floor has been painted green and black to match the blocks. However, over time, the green overpainting to hide subsequent tagging is no longer a close match. The tenant on the corner of Wooster Street has erected freestanding planters with a trellis to restrict access to the facade, as shown in the image on the left. However, graffiti artists still manage to work around the plants. Next slide. Approximately a year ago, when a new tenant was applying for LPC approval for their new storefront design, the building owners discussed with the LPC staff how best to handle their graffiti problem. LPC staff suggested that the methods for removing paint and graffiti should be investigated. The owners reached out to contractors and cleaning product manufacturers for solutions. And finally, they hired Jablonski Building Conservation to test removal options. We tested 8 different products on the green and black areas at the ground floor. Full removal of the paint and graffiti residues was achieved using 2 overnight applications of Cathedral Stone's light-duty paint stripper. To further illustrate the frequency at which this facade is tagged, our paint stripping tests were tagged between the first and second application of the products. Next slide. After considering several options for combating the graffiti, we propose removing the current overpainting and graffiti, painting the masonry in approved colors to minimize the appearance of the existing damage, and repainting the masonry as it gets tagged with graffiti. Continued removal every time the facade is tagged will further erode the blocks, resulting in their ultimate destruction. And replacement of these blocks will require a custom product due to the variety of sizes and the integrally colored surface. To further explain the process, the current layers of paint and graffiti would be removed using the 2 applications of the Cathedral Stone light duty paint stripper, as determined during the paint stripping tests. The masonry would then be painted using matte latex paints in improved colors that match the original block. JBC matched the green block to Pittsburgh Paint's Paradise Found and the black or dark gray block to Pittsburgh Paint's Knight's Armor. If approved, these colors will be mocked up and adjusted as necessary to achieve the closest match. And then finally, as the building gets tagged, tenants of the building management company can paint over the graffiti using the approved paints. The layers of overpainting and graffiti will then be periodically and professionally removed, perhaps every few years, and then repainted. Next slide. To close, we believe this method has a number of benefits. Periodic repainting is easily maintainable by tenants and does not require specialized expertise to execute. Acrylic latex paint can be matched to the color and sheen of the blocks and can be removed easily. Mineral paints can also achieve the same color and surface finish of the block. However, they are permanent and must be mechanically removed using microabrasive techniques that can erode the block, which ironically is what we're trying to avoid. And lastly, painting over the graffiti as it occurs reduces the number of times the facade needs to be stripped and thereby limits the potential for further erosion of the blocks. Thank you. Next slide. You just go to the next one.
Thank you very much. Any questions, commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Ginsburg.
I just want to confirm the paint will be a breathable masonry paint.
Well, we were going to do an acrylic latex paints, which are breathable.
Well,
to an
you
extent.
can, within that, I know at least Benjamin Moore makes a breathable
Yes,
masonry
yes,
paint.
yes.
So, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
All right, other questions? Commissioner Chu.
So the painting scope goes up to what height on the building?
Historically, and we've been lucky with this, is that the painting is always as high up as a person can reach.
Okay.
So it basically comes as they go, and I think it's because the building is sort of quiet in the evening. It's not a very dynamic place at night, and people come along and just paint it real quick. And so far, but what we're looking to do is just paint where the graffiti occurs. Actually, the idea is we're going to strip the building. We're going to then paint everything with water-based paint, so that whatever happens after we paint and it gets to a little level, we can take it off. You see, the problem before was the oil-based paint just was eating into the didn't notice it for the first 15, 20 years, but and that's when we had a problem and decided we had to do more. And that the water-based paint means that we strip it less, and when we do strip it, it does less damage.
And then in terms of the limits of the painting, we will try to find a very logical spot where for now we can get it so that it doesn't look like we're just stopping in the middle of a location. So, I mean, maybe for right now, it might be the top of the black.
Even.
You know, can I go? Can I?
Yes.
So
She wants the point.
All right.
So what it is where they go, and unfortunately we have other buildings where this is an issue, and we've had people climb up and do it. So wherever they do it is where we want to be. And so fortunately, I think this would be the same thing here.
All right, Commissioner Jefferson.
Yeah, so
followed by
what's the
Commissioner
degree
Lucky.
of coverage before you repaint? 10%, 15%, 25%, two piers? At what point do you decide to repaint?
So we would have to do, I mean, if you look at this picture, basically every pier gets tagged. Every pier has damage and everything along the first floor is vulnerable and deteriorated, so we would do everything on the ground floor at least. So, I mean, we can't, we wouldn't just do, these two piers, because as you can see, it's happening
You'll
along
see,
the-
you see some changes in the color. The changes in the color were our tenants doing something.
Their own
They didn't
repair.
use the right kind of color. So we're not looking to paint, we're looking to get rid of graffiti, period.
Right, and it would be one color that everybody would be using.
Yes, so exactly, so it'll be one color that everyone will
Right. We're gonna
be
keep it
using,
that.
that everyone will have. So we will, as you saw in the presentation, I had matched some colors, but we'd also mock them up, tweak, adjust colors as necessary. I mean, those are just stock colors. We might, luck out on the first try, but
Okay,
we never do. But we'll mock them up and
all right, thanks. Commissioner Lutfi.
So they'll be painting as needed, correct? And you had said that you're gonna strip the whole building, repaint it so that we have a,
Whole building, just where it's.
no, we're gonna
Just where
strip
it's
paint from the facade.
Just graffiti.
Correct.
no,
No, I
to
think-
start,
To start, correct.
just to
correct.
start, you're doing the whole building. So that's what ultimately what my question is. Because at some point, and you'll be applying, coats over time, at some point, there, in the areas where you're painting, it's going to read differently than the upper portion of the facade. So in your opinion, how often do you think you'll have to go back and, how many applications before you have to go back and repaint the building? I'm just
Or
curious.
strip it, because
Yes,
they're gonna strip it
strip
periodically.
it again and repaint it, because it's going to have to happen.
No, definitely, and that's in our plan.
I have to figure it out. It's really the answer. We're certainly gonna do the first one and see how, and the way we're doing this, which is different than the way all of our other buildings are, is we
Mhm.
would have a company come and deal with the graffiti as it occurs.
Mhm.
The issue really is, where it's most effective in our buildings, you have the ability to clean it right away, that stops it. And this way we'll give install all the colors of paint he needs, a couple of gallons each. And you get up in the morning and they see that there's something on the roll down or wherever it is, and they paint it, and it's over. That's what we're looking to do.
And
So it
then,
might have to be maybe like on a calendar type basis, so 3 to 5 years.
We'll do whatever it takes.
and then when you do that, are you talking to the commission again? Is that how it's going to work?
No, because we approved the
We-
color. Right. Okay. Any other questions? Let's move to public testimony. Is there anyone in the room who would like to speak on this item? Noting that there isn't, I'll turn it over to Gregory Kala to see if we have any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. I do not see any remote participants with their hands raised. If you would like to speak on this item, please click the raise hand button now so I can call on you. Okay, noting I do not see any hands raised. So I will just note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 2 recommends approval as long as the plan is limited to the first floor. And with that, I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
All right, thank you. So is there any final comment you'd like to make before we move to our discussion? No, any? So,
I think I told a lot of them. Basically. Not that far, right. The idea is only to paint, as I said before, where the graffiti is. And that we've been lucky, and if we don't have to paint above the first floor, that's okay. But if somebody comes along and climbs up, as you can do, as they are, somehow the graffiti guys are everywhere, that they would do it. We would just like the ability to do it. The idea isn't to paint. The idea is to keep the building looking the way it was designed and looking as crisp and as nice as it really is.
Okay, thanks. Any final questions, commissioners? All right, let's move to our discussion. Commissioner Lutfi, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Chu, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the hearing's closed and we'll begin our discussion. This is a building, as you've heard, that was constructed in 1984 with commission approval. And this is a proposal to address the graffiti. The surface of the masonry has eroded over time from the many attempts to strip the graffiti, and they've done a number of tests and come up with a plan that would be an ongoing plan to paint with a breathable, removable latex paint with a color that would be verified in field to match on an as-needed basis. And when the layers would accumulate, then they would strip and ultimately repaint, but it would reduce the number of stripping that has to happen each time. So that's the plan, and we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Jefferson, would you like to start this one?
Sure. A devilish problem in the urban city. It's a reasonable approach, and I hope it works. And graffiti moved from being a problem on buildings to being art. So that's a real problem too. But I think the solution they came up with water-based paint and a system of thinking about it works well.
All right. Commissioner Goldblum?
I agree. It's funny. I've often had situations where clients are worried about graffiti. And your first thought is like, let's amp this up. Let's try to make something really resistant and hard and easy to clean. And in the end, what usually happens is that people can't afford that. And you do something that's a compromise, and then you kind of are stuck with this problem. And in the end, this is allowing somebody to just throw some paint on it is probably the way cheaper than calling the stripping company and having them redo the whole thing. And it does degrade the finish of the material as well, as we can see here. This building was a quickie and a cheapie. I feel bad talking about it without Fred present, but it really added a lot to the streetscape for a very low price. And it was a very charming building that kind of was at the very beginning of the kind of commercialization and poshization of Soho. And as such, it's a charming little landmark of its own. I think that the solution is totally appropriate. However, I would say that you want to draw a line. Where that line is can be decided by the staff and the applicant, but whether it's at the top of the black surrounds or somewhere above that or some, there should be a line. Because what's going to happen is that if most of the graffiti will happen down at within hand's reach, because the paint will inevitably look different than the block, the more you can kind of hold to that line, the more uniform the building will look. If you wind up having to do a little patch here and a little patch there above that line, I think that's where you might consider using the graffiti removal people. Odds are that will not be a significant problem unless they have scaffolding or something in the building. And it seems like that has not been where most of the problem has been. So I think as long as you hold that line, you're okay.
Okay. Commissioner Ginsburg?
It's appropriate. I agree with the other commissioners.
Commissioner Lutfi?
Yeah, I just want to echo a little bit what Michael said. This building, was of a moment in time, an important moment in helping to define this whole area, and its look and feel was perfect. It's quirky, colorful, but it is a big mass, and it does it's an invitation to have people make a statement, let's say. So as the other my fellow commissioners have said, sometimes the best solution is the simplest. And this is one that will need over time, they will need to repaint the whole building and strip it, but short term, it will easily solve the problem and it will be helpful for the retailers on the street. They, you know, they don't want to have their entryways marred. So I can support this. I also want to say something else, just off topic. You know, Bob Esnard, I don't know if everybody knows, but he was a deputy mayor in the Koch administration where I actually got my first job. I know. And, you know, has served the city very well on the public side and now on the private sector side. So thank you so much.
Very nice. Thank you, Commissioner Chu.
Yes, I'm in agreement. I think it's appropriate, and I think the applicant will work with staff on the right color match, because ultimately it's about the color of this building. And it was, I believe, a glazed block. So adherence of any pigment to a glazed product is sensitive. So again, it's going to be about how the block takes color.
Okay. All right. So I think we can do a motion to approve it. And why don't we say that if paint has to be, if the graffiti has to be addressed above the black line, they can come back and work with staff on that. Yes. The windows. Okay, so we'll make anything above the windows will come back and they'll address separately with the staff. Is that, I mean, Commissioner Goldblum, I think that was really your suggestion. And the one thing I would say, and you might have been out of the room when we discussed it and when they presented it, but they're going to strip the whole building to start. So everything actually will be the same color. And so is that okay? Okay, so we'll do a motion to approve as is. Okay.
In the matter of LPC -24-09992, 63-85 West Houston, Austin Street, Soho Cast Iron Historic District. Application is to paint the facades. I know that the building was constructed in 1982 pursuant a commission level approval. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed work at this modern commission approved building will not eliminate any damage, any significant architectural features of the building, that the many concrete units in the facade have been damaged by repeated application of graffiti removers. Therefore, painting is the most effective and gentlest means for maintaining the color of the damaged colored concrete units without causing further damage. That, as proposed, after multiple layers of paint are applied over time, the paint will be removed and reapplied, helping to maintain breathability. That only discolored or otherwise damaged section will be painted and be proposed paint color will match the color of the underlying units, and that the proposed work will help maintain the building over time. And we add that the paint will be limited or be limited to the datum line above as is. Okay.
Second. Chair Carroll, Commissioner Chu.
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg. Aye. Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
6 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
That's approved. Thank you. We'll move to the next item.
The next item is public hearing item number 3, LPC 24-08313, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 625, Lot 32, 44 Jane Street in the Greenwich Village Historic District. This is a Greek Revival style row house built in 1846, and the application is to construct rooftop and rear yard additions and reconstruct the rear facade.
Good morning. My name is Jeffrey Povero. We are looking at 44 Jane. And we're looking to reconstruct an existing rear yard extension and to add a rooftop addition. Next slide. It's in the Greenwich Village Historic District. The interesting thing is that Jane Street and the blocks around it does run sort of east-west, so it does have a true north and true south direction, and that 8th Avenue cuts through the block significantly. This property is towards the inside of that angle. Next. The block, the row was built basically from west to east, and 44 is near the end of that row. And it appears that the Greek Revival style was going out of fashion as they built the row. So the second to last on the row had a lot of Italianate elements that appear to be original. It's important because if you look at the next slide, the Italianate elements, including there's a double parlor door, there's the more elaborate brownstone hoods over the windows, the 2/2 windows, but most importantly, there's a much larger cornice on this property. It's about 2 feet higher than its neighbors. Next slide. So an overview, and it's easiest to see in section. The existing on the left, the proposed on the right is a reconstruction of the rear yard extension and a rooftop addition. And I have a lot of sections. We can go back and look at them as we need to. Next, please. So to break it up, the rear yard extension is, first of all, it's important to note that it's not visible from any public way. Next. So we're looking at the reconstruction of the portion of the building that is from the brick rear facade outward. Next. And what we do find is that there was, in these insurance maps, we find that the rear extensions were all on this row, were all made of wood originally, likely T-porches. But even as soon as 1862, many of them were being rebuilt in masonry. They show up as masonry structures, including the neighbor to the east, 46 Jane, had a larger masonry structure added already, even a little over a decade after it was originally built. Next. Looking at the overall block, you can see 44 Jane in the upper right has a 3-story rear yard extension. Its neighbor is also 3 stories. There's a row of 2-story extensions and another 3-story extension, as well as a 3-story extension on the back of an 8th Avenue building. Just to give you an overview of the overall block, on the south side on Abingdon Square, it's a very large apartment building. There's a few tenement buildings on Hudson Street and on the corner of 12th and 8th Avenue. The rest of 8th Avenue are low stoop or no stoop 3-story buildings. And the Jane Street Garden replaces a lost building on the corner of Jane and 8th Avenue. Next. So looking at the interior of the block, it's very difficult to photograph because it is so tight, but the key plan should help. On the left are the 2-story high masonry extensions. Number B is actually looking at the, on the right of that image is the back of 44 Jane. On the left is the masonry extension on 46 Jane. And the middle photograph shows how much further that 46 Jane extension extends past 44 Jane. And then D and E show the conditions across the block, across the court, where most of the facades are clad in stucco with some brick extensions as well. So that on the far right on E is the it's a 3-story extension off of the 8th Avenue house. Next. The extension itself on the left is as good of a photograph as we could take considering the tight site. It is 2 stories raised above the basement level. So it's overall 3 stories high, but it's really two interior stories with a porch or a void underneath. We did a significant probing of the facade to see if there was any historical evidence of the details of an original T-porch. We did not find any. We did find was a wood structure, had been covered in wood boards, and then asphalt shingles, and then aluminum siding. But no extant evidence that we could find of any kind of details or columns or railings. And on the right, the three images show the condition of the third floor, of the top floor that's above the rear yard extension. And this is a preview of something we're going to talk about in a minute, but just where there's missing window lintels and inconsistent sills where brickwork had been patched over time. But the house does seem to have its original wood cornice at the top. And as you look to the upper right image, you can see the corbelled brick from some of the other rear top facades where they've lost their wood cornice, but we do seem to have the original one on this house. And if we go to the next slide, we can see our proposed design for the rear yard extension. On the left is the existing conditions where there is the aluminum siding with a sort of hodgepodge of windows, most that don't appear to be from the original period of the house. Aluminum windows, some wood windows, but the organization of as ugly as that is, there is a logic to it in that it aligns with the center line of the parlor. So the interior of the existing rear yard addition has two rooms, one the width of the parlor and one the smaller width of the stair. So in our new proposed design, we use some of those organizing features, in particular the center line of the parlor, to organize a tripartite door and window configuration at the basement level, continuing that tripartite configuration at the parlor floor, which becomes a paired window at the second floor, and then becomes an opening in the railing at the third floor rear terrace. And the part of the facade to the right or to the east becomes solid on the ground floor, a louvered opening on the second floor, or on the parlor floor, and a small window on the third floor. And this is the tightest part of that triangle. Next. And there is because the rear yard extension extends significantly past the east neighbor at 42 Jane. So we are adding a few small windows in that facade. They do not access. They access a bathroom and a staircase, so they're not accessing habitable rooms. Next, please. This is a rendering of the rear facade with the ideas of how to use the materiality on the base. We're using brick to match the rear facade, the original rear facade that references the brownstone base on the front of the building, sort of a masonry base, but using a more everyday material. But we're using the cast stone to match the brownstone as trim material. So for a water table string course, as well as moving into the body of the addition on the parlor and second floors is in stucco, which harmonizes with the facades that are around it, where you have a stucco facade on these rear extensions. But again, using that brownstone as trim, and balanced out with all of the windows and doors are wood painted a dark green, which is the color that we found on the original facade. The top floor, you can just see that the plan is to replace the non-existent or the lost lintels using the same cast stone to match the brownstone. Next. This is you can see how tight that rear view is. This is another impossible to see view because we're having to float somewhere. But there are apartment buildings from the rear, so this view may exist for someone, but again, it's not visible from the public way. Next. And this is just plans showing on the basement floor. It goes from being a enclosed porch, which is the city considers an interior space, to a true interior space. And next, and how that parlor floor center line organizes the facade and why the windows are where they are. Next. So the rooftop addition, we broke out a little bit separately because this is visible from a public way. We go to the next slide. This is a really critical understanding of the block because 8th Avenue cuts through the block and because the building on the corner was lost and the Jane Street Garden is there. We always knew in designing this building, it was going to be a visible rooftop addition. There's really no way to hide it. So in doing so, we started to really look at what would be an appropriate rooftop addition. So if you go to the next slide, we walked extensively around the Greenwich Village Historic District and looked at accretions on the roof that we think added to the streetscape instead of detracted from them. And of course, we fell in love with the studio windows and that sort of understanding of how these houses evolved over time into artists' studios. And it very much is part of what we think of when we think of the West Village or the village in general. But what we were looking at specifically was how did these studio windows fit into their buildings that they sat on? How close to the front facade were they? What angle did they appear to be? And most importantly, and the more vexing is what happened behind the studio windows, which there's a lot of different ways in which that happens. In fact, the old the building on 8th Street, you can see there's three solutions to the same problem within one building. Next. But we also looked very specifically at 3 projects that were the nearest to this particular site that had gone through LPC approval in the more recent years. Looking here at 44 Horatio Street, which is 1 block to the north from us, it has a studio window addition that is sort of in between the front face of the building and the center of the facade. It angles up and then goes straight back to create quite a bit of interior space. So it creates a large roof. This is very visible from the street and was designed to be visible from the street. So this was one. We also, I'll talk about it in a minute. We looked at the very important dimension of the top of the cornice to the top of the addition as being the really critical height. The height of the addition is less important because it could be coming down 2 stories into the building. It was that critical dimension we tried to look at for each of these projects. Next. And this was not a studio window because it doesn't face north and has more of a roof, but we looked at very close to the site is 327 West 4th Street, which has an angled addition that's about 6 feet from the facade of the building. So we looked at this one, and then next. One that you will all recognize on Horatio Street, where we have a studio window, again, that goes straight back after it angles up and has quite a lot of area on the side of the window exposed with a metal cladding. Next. Next door to us is at 46 Jane, was a recently approved rooftop addition. And this one is not visible from the street or from the rear because it's tucked a little farther into the block. But this is our neighbor directly to the west. What we were looking at in particular was that 12'3" dimension, the top of their cornice to the top of the peak of the roof. Next. So we were faced with the task of, unlike the previous project, which was not visible, we were given the task of designing a rooftop addition that was visible. So what we did was we looked specifically at that dimension, those dimensions we saw on those projects of somewhere between 12'3", 12'6", 12'8", in that range of the distance between the top of our cornice to the top of the addition. Remember, our cornice is about 2 feet taller than the neighboring cornices. So next. We located our rooftop addition, by the way, it's about 12 feet from the front of the building. That also aligns with the historic staircase to be able to continue the staircase up through. It takes it as far away from Jane Street as possible. It does bring it closer to the rear, which is a different problem, but we're keeping it about 7 feet from the rear as well. So it's the idea of trying to find the balance between locating it towards Jane Street, which would lessen the visibility on 8th Avenue or towards 8th Avenue or toward the rear to lessen the visibility from Jane Street. The other thing I'll point out here is that we are currently planning on being able to add the lintels to the rear facade without having to reconstruct it, but we did want to bring it up now that should we need to reconstruct that during the process, if there's turns out to be engineering problems that we haven't seen yet, that the idea is to reconstruct as little of it as possible and to use the existing brick coursing, the existing brick matching, and if at all possible, to actually use the original material of that wood cornice, because it seems to be in salvageable shape. We could take it down and put it back up again. Any reconstruction is going to be at also the exact same height as what it is there now. This section also helps to see that we've lowered the actual floor level of the rooftop addition so that to minimize any the visual impact. One thing that I'm sure you've seen 100 times is because of this addition, the neighboring, both for this project and its neighboring flues and chimneys have to be raised. We looked at raising them directly straight up. We looked at angling them back, and actually raising them straight up had the least amount of impact on that sort of triangle visibility. So it is visible from Jane Street, but it's visible in the context of a lot of other chimneys. I'll show you that in a minute. Next. So this is a section through our neighbor at 46 Jane, showing the our proposed rooftop addition juxtaposed on that existing building and section. The important thing to note is that we needed to make sure that the plane of our facade, our west-facing facade, was at a different plane than that roof to be able to waterproof between the two of them. So we located the angle specifically so that we would be able to coordinate with that. That is actually under construction right now, so we'll be able to coordinate with it. And that the rear of our addition aligns approximately with the height of the elevator bulkhead that is under construction for that, which you can see on the right. Next. And looking the other way, this section shows kind of the worst part of the project, which is the fact that we have showing the HVAC condenser, which sits on the roof. We don't have enough room in the rear yard because there's almost no rear yard to put the condenser anywhere else. But what we did do is locate it as far to the west as possible to minimize its visibility from 8th Avenue and West 12th Street. But that is as we all know, it's kind of a fixed thing. It is what it is. And what we've done is we've minimized as much as possible how it sits into the section, which you'll see when we look at the mock-ups. Next. So in plan, existing on the left with just a skylight and a roof hatch, the floor plan, it's minimal, so it's just the width of the stair. The extension, the roof does overhang on the south to reduce solar gain on the south windows, but the floor plan itself is basically the width of the historic stair extended across the house. And then you can also see where those HVAC condensers are located towards the west to minimize visibility. They're also on the center line of that parlor floor center line that organizes the house. The other thing to point out is there's a dormer in the studio window on the Jane Street side to allow access to the front of the house for a terrace. That doesn't appear to be visible from any public way. You'll just see the studio window itself. If there is a little bit of visibility, I'll point it out in the mock-up. Next. So here's the, usually seeing an elevation flattened is a little terrifying, so forgive me, but you can see that there is a rooftop addition at 42 Jane as well as 46 Jane. So we were building in between those two. And we have you can see the higher cornice that 46 Jane has historically. Next. And from the rear, we are looking at that center line showing from the basement floor all the way up through the house. That center line organizes all the way up through to where that condenser is located. Next. So we built a mock-up of the studio window, the roof addition, as well as the modifications to the masonry chimneys and the flue extensions. So here's the mock-up, and you can also see on both images the under construction rooftop addition at 46 Jane. Next. So we identified 3 places that we knew this was going to be visible, and we've confirmed that it is. So A is coming down Jane Street, in particular at the corner of the Jane Street Tavern at the corner of Jane and 8th Avenue. So sort of Jane Street Tavern, Bon Señor, if you know that area, that's kind of the view where you're looking up because the building is missing on the corner. There's some visibility there. We also knew that the primary place where the project would be visible is what I consider one of the great landmarks of New York, which is the Chase Bank ATM, which was the original ATM in the West Village on West 12th Street. So right when you come out of that ATM and there's a service entrance right there, looking past Casa Magazines, you can look up towards the building. You're looking above the lower 3-story buildings from 8th Avenue and through their chimneys and rooftop accretions. And then see there's a little bit of visibility on the corner of Hudson and Jane on the northwest corner up against the building. Next. So starting with, this is the mock-up from basically Bon Señor, if you know that on the corner of Jane and 8th Avenue. You're looking up and it's unfortunately in the middle of summer, so it was hard to get very clear images, but you can see on the left and then on the right is a zoomed in image of what you would see from the side of that studio window. And the next slide shows our approximation of the rendering itself onto that mock-up to try to get those angles to see what you would actually see. And I think what you see on the right is we tried to enhance as much as possible to see if you could see it more clearly. Because of the foliage, it was difficult. And on the next image, you can see we just basically made ourselves even worse and really just took the foliage out to see what you would see from a distance. So this is what I want to call the worst case scenario, is where what you would see from the side. And the next slide shows, so this is just a panorama of the 8th Avenue block front. Just to remind you, there's the Bing and Ming building on Abingdon Square to the left, very tall tenement building, and then this low row of 3-story buildings on 8th Avenue, and that arrow points to our mock-up. And if you go to the next, I know this is a panorama that's distorted. If you go to this is a direct photo from that service entrance next to the Chase Bank ATM. On the left, you can see the mock-up, and on the right is a zoomed in. And there you can see how we took the condensing unit and moved it as far to the west as possible to minimize visibility. I will also point out there's other condensing units on the roof. There's rooftop aerials and chimneys and other accretions that have come over time on that 8th Avenue roofing. Behind this, there is somewhat blue sky. There are some cresting of the tenement buildings that are on Jane Street across the street. But again, this is what I consider the worst case as far as visibility goes. And next, where we've taken our model and overlaid it to try to get those angles to see what you would really see. I will point out that one of the really helpful feedback we got from the community board was about making this look like the studio window. In previous designs that had more of a modern feel, and it just wanted to look. So we took the zinc cladding down, so it really down the faces, so it really does feel like it is just a sloped up studio window. Next. Oh, this is just a line we were showing where, if that tree weren't there, where does the facade continue? Next. And then this is that little bit of visibility you can see from the corner of Hudson and Jane. On the left is what you really see, and on the right is zoomed in. What is helpful is seeing it in context with the other chimney and flue extensions that are along that along the street. Next. And then here is our rendering in superimposed. This is, I will say, it's actually very hard to see. But I wanted to make sure that you saw what you could possibly see. Next. And then on Jane Street itself, the rooftop addition is not visible. You cannot see the studio window, you cannot see the dormer. What you can see are some of those flue extensions, which I pointed out with arrows and with the orange boards. So on the left is from the Jane Street garden above the trees. You do see two of the flue extensions. On the right, right directly across from the house on Jane Street, you do see the flue extension. And on the far right, you see the flue, you can see the existing flue and you see where the new flue extensions would be next door. Next. And we collaged in the design of the rooftop addition with its neighbors to show that there's basically a cluster of similarly scaled rooftop additions along Jane Street that are also set similarly far back from Jane. Next. And from another view, this is above Jane Street, showing how our studio window addition fits in with a simpler shed on the right, and on the left is an older flat roofed addition. Next. And here, looking west across Jane Street, again, shows it at its sort of most extreme, but seeing that the angle of the rooftop addition is such that it starts out closer to the facade, but moves back very quickly away from the Jane Street side to make sure that that's not visible. Next. And then these are just some details. So the idea is to look at the existing, looking at studio windows, and we actually took some of the feedback from the community board as well about, we added more divisions to the studio window, which is more in keeping with the historic designs, and clad the non-glass portions in standing seam zinc in a darker gray color so that it blends better into the context. And we've taken the angle, which is about 20 degrees off of vertical of the studio window, off of approximations of what we could see from historic ones, not necessarily the modern ones, but the older ones. And then we slope back the roof at a 13 degrees off of horizontal, both to minimize the height on the rear, but also looking at the way the historic studio windows that didn't come straight back, but had spaces behind them, appeared to be about that angle. You could also see here where the masonry chimneys and flue extensions are. So the one on the left, the stucco one, is an existing chimney, and the one on the right is our constructed brick chimney, which matches the distance from the facade of the one that's on the left. Next. And then from the rear, so this is where we've taken that zinc roof cladding and just brought it down the front face of the addition. By the way, what's inside of that roof is the HVAC units. So there's the exterior condenser, and then there's the air handler that fits into that that sandwich between there. Next. And our materials that we're using, so where we do have to do new brick on the ground floor of the rear yard extension is to match the existing rear brick. Brownstone, we're matching cast stone to brownstone. We're never seeing them on the same facade. This will be on a new facade. Stucco to match the neighbors that are right next door to us. Black painted metal for the rooftop extension metal, and then with the standing seam Rhine zinc, and using the dark green for all of the wood windows. Next. And finally, this is just some overview of just how tight that corner is and how these two projects fit into that angle and into that corner. Next. That's it.
Right, thank you. Commissioners, do we have questions? Yes, Commissioner Jefferson.
I have a sight line drawing showing across the street.
So I guess directly across the street, you just see the chimney flues. You don't see the actual addition, but if you move to the corner, you start to see the sloped glass, but not directly across the street. But at the point where I guess point B, or maybe across 8th Avenue, do you ever see the dormer, or do you just see the sloped piece above the dormer?
We don't think you see the dormer. It's orange on orange, of course, at the top, but if you see the dormer, you just see where it breaks off. If we go to that, one, yeah, there we go. Go one more back to the orange. It's possible that that's what that is, but it's very hard to tell with the leaves. I wouldn't say, I guarantee you would never see the beginning of that dormer, but you certainly don't see it in any, fully at all.
And at the back, you're seeing the straight up elevation, and you sort of, it's a 3/4 view. So you're seeing the side sloping up. Okay. All right. Yeah, Commissioner Goldblum, followed by Commissioner Ginsburg.
Air conditioner, could it go on one of the front or back patios?
Well,
Technically?
with the amount of clearance it needs around it and free airspace, because our neighbor to the west has an elevator bulkhead there, it would basically need to sit in the middle of the rear terrace, making it unusable. So that's why we wanted to locate it. And again, the backyard also was not available to us.
Right, and does staff, were those ACs that are up there now that you can see on the neighboring building, were those approved by LPC?
We'd have to investigate that. Not sure.
Thanks.
Commissioner Ginsburg.
So that mechanical condenser is pretty tall. Did you look at a solution where you had two condensers that were lower next to each other to cut the view?
We did look at, actually it would be 3 in order to get the number.
Right.
Above my pay grade, but, and what it ended up happening is that the area that it sat in became much larger. So in other words, they couldn't go as low as like a little Mitsubishi unit, but they were still visible, and it moved towards, the east. So we determined that one unit farther west was less visible than multiple units. This is early in the design process, but that as large as this appears, it was less visible than having 3 units that you could see more from the street.
Thank you.
All right. Other questions? Yes, Commissioner Lutfi.
Yeah.
There's tiny numbers at the bottom. Forgive me.
Okay, well, you have a drawing, you have a line drawing of the.
It's a section drawing.
It's a section.
This is the dimension section.
Wish I could, I could probably.
It's 26.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, 26.
Oh, thank you. So not that one.
There we go.
I think it's.
Yes.
Yeah. So, okay, the height's 15.3. What is the length to the front door from front to back? I don't see that.
From, are you looking at the actual interior space or from the front of the building?
No, yeah, from the extension.
How deep is the room?
How deep is the room going to that front door? So that, yep, from there to there, from there to, yeah. How deep is that room?
I don't have that number in front of me. I'll give you a sense of scale. This is about 12.5 feet.
Mhm.
So you can say it's probably in the 15 to 16 foot range.
Mhm. Thank you.
All right. Any other? Yes, Commissioner Jefferson.
In terms of your diagonal window, could you have set it into the volume and just not set the diagonal within the volume? So you just see the shape, but not the diagonal. So you have a volume, you could set the diagonal window inside the volume. Therefore, you don't see the diagonal. Right now, you're making the diagonal, in your drawing, you're showing the diagonal being dominant. If you kept the shape and set it in the building, you would see the shape of the volume, but not the diagonal. And it would fit into what was there originally. Did you think of that?
Not sure I understand.
Okay.
He's asking if you could set the dormer inward instead of outward so that the volume or make the door part of the slope.
Just set it.
So yes, it is a possibility. If you're saying that, for example, if that line went straight down.
No. Go to your perspective at the end. You show a perspective of your building. Okay, your dominant feature is the plane shifting backwards, right? I'm saying if you kept the volume, shift the plane inside the volume, you won't see that. So it'd be, the language would be exactly the same as what you had before.
Very good class, great.
I think what,
Keep the angled shape.
regardless, I think what he's saying is the dormer, the entry to the slope studio, right? Is if it were an innie and not an outie.
That's it.
Because I have the same comment. The thing you see, the traditional studio skylights on these townhouses are always just a nice slope.
Right.
And that's all you see, and it has a scale relationship to the rest of the building below. This one has the gesture, but the dormer, to me, takes over the facade. And it provides a perpendicular face that you see.
Right.
That's opaque.
Yeah, I understand. Okay.
And it seems like there is a possibility at this height that you would catch the top of the dormer from the corner of 8th Avenue and
All of our attempts to mock that up did not show it, but I can't say that I would.
Right.
You know, I want to be clear that
Yeah.
it's possible. Yes.
Okay.
I have a question too, just in terms of regardless of your proposed height, if I were to look at this rooftop addition, could I push it south? I'm looking at your neighboring lots, 46, 42. One of them has a bulkhead that protrudes you have a view, actually. I think it's slide.
Of the section through.
Your last slide,
Okay.
50, I think. If you look at slide 50, there we go. There's a bulkhead right in that corner, right?
Right.
Behind you. On 46, the 46, that.
An
And-
elevator over.
An elevator overrun, and to the other side, their rooftop extension extends further south than you. I'm just wondering, when I look at your proposal, I also want to say it's very complete. Thank you for all the drawings and views because they're very helpful. From my perspective, I get concerned about the view like from Tavern on Jane, which is on the corner. When you're across from the corner park looking up is the mass of this. And I'm just wondering what ways can you diminish that bulk? Could it have moved back a little bit?
It is, I mean, of course, I think the idea is that the historic staircase continues up and that's the.
Right,
front.
that's what's locking
That's
you.
what's locking it to the front and it starts to slope back from there. So it's not full height there, but it starts to slope back. There is a section it's locked into where the historic staircase is. But yeah, I mean, it's possible. It's just that.
It's where you get headroom through the opening going up.
Right.
Is where you start
That's where it
that
starts.
start.
other questions. All right, we'll move to public testimony and we may have questions after that. Is there anyone in the room who would like to speak on this item? Okay, noting that there isn't, I will turn it over to Gregory Collett to see if we have any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We have a couple of hands raised in our remote testimony. The first we'll be hearing from is Chloe Gregoire from Village Preservation. Chloe Gregoire, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. And once you're a panelist, please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good day, Commissioners. My name is Chloe Gregoire, and I'm speaking on behalf of Village Preservation. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. Village Preservation finds the proposed rooftop addition to be overly large and excessively visible, and in some areas too heavy and solid in its materiality to warrant approval as currently designed. A smaller and less visible rooftop addition with a design that incorporates more transparency could be acceptable here. We lament the proposed deconstruction of the historic wood T-porch, which is likely original to the house. We also seek verification that the top floor
of the historic rear facade will be retained, as the published scope to reconstruct the rear facade was not clarified in the presentation deck. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we'll be hearing from Christina Conroy from the Victorian Society, New York. Christina Conroy, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Christina Conroy for the Victorian Society, New York. Now, the Victorian Society is happy to support most of the changes proposed for 44 Jane Street. At the rear, the demolition of the existing addition will not destroy any significant historic material. Because of the proposed rear yard addition maintains the footprint of the existing addition, the work will not diminish the green space at this end of this unusually configured block. And we are pleased to see that the windows and lintels at the top floor will be restored to their original shape, although we believe 6/6 sash would be a better choice than the proposed 2/2. Finally, we'll note that the proposed rear yard addition has been detailed in a charming manner, which recalls the significant early 20th century alterations seen on Greenwich Village row houses. But we must recommend that the height of the rooftop addition, shown on board 26 to be 15 feet by 3 inches tall, be reduced. As it is, the new construction will be overly visible from the corner of 8th Avenue and 12th Street, as shown on board 38. The applicants have compared their addition to the neighboring one at 46 Jane Street, but the one at 44 Jane will be 2 feet 4 inches taller than the one at 46, as shown on board 27. Aligning the two will significantly reduce this visibility. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I do not see any additional hands raised, so I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 2 recommends approval of the reconstructed rear yard extension and denial of the rooftop addition as currently designed, noting that the highly visible portion is sorely out of place in the district and asks that the applicant return to the committee with the design that is more truly evocative of the historic reference cited. And with that, I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
All right, thank you. Would you like to respond to the comments we've heard?
I would just like to point out that we took to heart what the community board mentioned to us in the meeting, and some of the things that they had, what we had talked about and discussed that we did apply here, which also took away some of the detailing that might have been preferred by some of the other commenters. But the idea is to make it appear as much as possible like what you're seeing is the rear of a studio window and not a totally modern addition on top of the house.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioners, any final questions? All right, so we'll move to close the hearing. Commissioner Ginsburg, would you make a motion to close the hearing? Thank you. Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so we'll begin our discussion. The first part of the application is to reconstruct a rear yard addition in the same footprint as the existing rear yard addition. The applicant did probes, did not find evidence of the historic T-porch underneath. And at the top floor, this application has evolved a bit since it was originally calendared, and I think even since our staff comments were written. So I think at the top floor, the proposal is now to try to keep the top floor intact and just restore the lintels and sills. But if there are structural issues during construction, then they'd like to have the ability to reconstruct using existing materials. And then there's the rooftop addition, which is they're lowering the roof, but its overall height is 15 foot 3 inches, and it's modeled on studio windows. The applicant showed other examples of studio windows that are historic, as well as many visible additions that the commission has approved that model studio windows. And we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Goldblum, would you like to start?
Sure. I think that first of all, what a curious sight. You got to really like your neighbors. I think that the rear yard addition is generally quite lovely and appropriate. I think that the asymmetrical approach is logical and it echoes what's there now, which may indeed be historic, or certainly old. I think that the way they handle the materials and the details is quite lovely. I think that their approach to the top floor of the building is generally consistent with our approach. They have shown that there appears to be removals made over time of lintels and other details that they're proposing to attempt to restore. And I think that the applicant should work with staff to try to minimize the amount of new material utilized. I think that retention of that rear yard cornice is really lovely, actually, and something we should keep in mind for folks in the future as an option if that is consistent with that style and can be seen if there's evidence for it in other buildings. It's a lovely detail. I think that the rooftop addition, they've done a lot of work to make their case, but for me, it comes down to the essential injustice of visibility for a particular site tends to trump precedent. And in addition, that is appropriate at one site can be inappropriate at another due to the degree of visibility, among other factors. And here, because it's relatively visible from several locations, I think that the volume should be taken down a little bit. I think there would be little to no functional sacrifice involved in reducing the height of that artist's window. I think that they can work with staff to reduce the visibility of that. I think it will remain visible, but I think the degree to which it is visible should be reduced. I think that Mark's suggestion about the AC is a good idea. Try to reduce I think the AC is a problem. That those two condensers do not look like something that we approved, and they are quite visible, and they do kind of project into the silhouette of the buildings. I don't think they should be used as a precedent or an excuse for sanctioned visibility of an AC unit like that. And while it's lovely to have lots of terraces on your house, sometimes the real estate and other things don't allow for it. I think that the AC should be either integrated better or put on a lower roof or something else, or just reduced in visibility in one way or another. I think that the chimneys are okay, but I think that if you reduce the height of the addition, the height of the chimneys goes down along with it.
Okay. Commissioner Ginsburg.
So, first of all, I want to thank you for a very complete and clear presentation. I agree with Commissioner Goldblum's comments. You have an 8'8" ceiling in the front and back of the rooftop addition, and I think that's not bad, but cutting the addition down above that would also reduce the height of the chimney extensions. I also think that doing that entrance in the front as an innie instead of an outie would help the design. And I think working with staff and the mechanical equipment, you should be able to resolve these issues.
All right, Commissioner Lutfi.
So I'm in total agreement. It's a very nice project. I'm happy that the top floor of the rear facade has evolved so that you'll be working to the best of your ability with the staff to use the existing brick. And I think it's all about the height. So in terms of the addition, so you need to reduce the height. I'm in favor of moving the entranceway on the inside. The condensers need to somehow not be visible. This really could be a terrible precedent. And the flue's too high.
All right, and for those of you who are suggesting having the door, the innie as opposed to the outie, if I was just gonna say, if that portion is deemed to definitely not be visible, do you have a strong feeling about it then?
If it's not visible.
Okay, so reducing the height may address that in itself. Okay, Commissioner
Very
Chu?
large, it's 3 bays right now. I'm not sure what that means, but it's taking a lot of prominence. It's more prominent than the simple studio skylight. That's,
I think the other thing is it takes away from this the concept of what a traditional skylight looks like. I think that's what we've all been saying as well.
Regardless of visibility.
Yeah.
Okay,
I don't have any other comments to add. I
Okay.
haven't gone, but I think, yeah, I'm in agreement with everyone else.
all right, great. So we will, oh, sorry, Commissioner
I
Jefferson.
don't have any other comments.
Okay. Great. Okay, so we're going to make a motion to approve this with the condition that they reduce the height of it and study either putting the dormer on the inside or reducing the width of it.
If they make like a sliding angle door. I don't think so, but.
Maybe
Sliding
angle
angle
door.
door, a sliding door. Yeah? All right. Yeah. Just curious. All right. Regarding 44 Jane Street in the Greenwich Village Historic District, the application is to construct rooftop and rear yard additions and reconstruct the rear facade. I note the building's style, scale, material, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Greenwich Village Historic District. I recommend approval with modifications, finding that the proposed work will not eliminate or damage any significant architectural features, that the proposed rooftop addition will be set back from the front and rear facades, and the rear yard addition will not rise to the top floor of the building, thereby maintaining a sense of the building's original volume, that the materials and finishes of the additions, featuring brick and stucco cladding at the rear addition and metal at the rooftop addition, will be compatible with the materials palette of the building and typical of the additions found within the historic district. The northern side of the rooftop addition will recall aspects of studio windows, a feature historically found at some buildings within the historic district. That the proposed rear yard addition featuring punched masonry openings and window and door assemblies will feature a level of articulation and a ratio of solid to void that is consistent with the rear yard additions at buildings within a block. That the proposed rear yard addition will match the height and depth of the existing rear yard addition to be replaced and others in the row, and will not further diminish the central green space. That the presence of the small outline windows at the rear yard garden addition directly facing a nearby rear facade with windows will be compatible with the atypically angled corner of the block, and that the proposed rear yard addition will not be visible from any public thoroughfares. However, I recommend that the applicant work with staff to reduce the height of the overall rooftop addition, to consider modifications to the design of the door facing north, the dormer door facing north, to reduce its visibility and impact, and to reduce the visibility and impact, and perhaps relocate the air conditioning units that are visible from the south.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right, John?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Chu.
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
6 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
That's approved. Please continue to work with the staff. We'll move to the next item.
Next item is public hearing item number 4, LPC 24-10852, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 1410, lot 69, 829 Park Avenue in the Upper East Side Historic District. This is a neoclassical style apartment building designed by Pickering and Walker, built 1910 to 11. The application is to modify an areaway wall and replace fencing.
Hello, Commissioners, Landmark staff. Thank you for hearing this application. My name is Gian Villarreal, representing Allen Kilcoyne Architects. This is 829 Park, an application to replace the fence on an existing low granite stone wall that runs along the East 76th Street elevation in front of below grade areaway.
First slide, please.
I think we fixed that computer. You should be able to click on the screen now and use the mouse or the arrow keys to advance.
Do I have to log in? No, it's not.
Abby, if you could do the slides for this, the computer is not logged in at the podium. Thanks.
So next,
Thank you. Okay, so the building is located on the southeast corner of Park Avenue and East 76th Street in the Upper East Side Historic District. It's a neoclassical style apartment building constructed between 1910, 1911, and is designed by Pickering and Walker. Here's the 1940s tax photo of the building, southwest view from Park Avenue on the left. On the right is a street view from East 76th Street, where you can see a portion of the areaway fence and service gate that's still there today. Bottom right. Next. Here we have a block plan where you can see the footprint of the building and the location of the below grade areaway on East 76th Street on the north facing side. The photo on the left shows the building in the 1950s, and on the right is the present day image, both showing the location of the areaway fence on the north side of the building, the bottom left. Next. Here we have some photos of existing conditions of the wall and fence as it appears from the sidewalk on East 76th Street on the top. The low wall is of granite block and it steps down as it goes from west to east, getting lower as it follows the slope of the sidewalk. At the corner of Park Avenue at the top, the granite wall is almost 1 foot tall, and at its farthest eastern portion is about 2 foot 9 inches tall. The existing fence panels that sit on top of the low granite wall are 7 foot 2 inches throughout. But because the sidewalk slope and the change of the height of the low walls, it looks as the overall height of the fence is getting lower as it progresses west to east. Please note that there's an existing service gate at the fence shown in the close-up below that leads to a below-grade stair and cellar entrance. Here is a close-up of the existing granite wall at the easternmost point in the center. And also please note that the areaway railing returns on Park Avenue shown here at the bottom right. Next. Here we have some additional existing photos, including the existing standpipe connection that will remain, a close-up of the existing fence rails and picket conditions, the existing stairway to the below-grade service passageway on the bottom, the service ladder to the areaway that will be replaced, and the existing rear fence supports in the bottom right. Next. Here we have the existing and proposed elevations. On the top is the existing configuration of the low wall and iron fence with the location of the one existing service gate shown on the left side. On the bottom is a proposed elevation where you can see that the matching granite coping stone is proposed to be installed on top of the existing granite wall, and the new loading gate is to be added. The new fence will be installed with panels of varying heights to create a uniform height at the fence overall, and will no longer have a stepped appearance at the top edge. At the most extreme west end, coming from Park Avenue, the fence panel will be 4 foot tall. It's on the right. And at the most extreme east end, the fence panel will be 7 foot 3 inches tall, similar in height to the existing. Next. Here we have the existing and proposed plans. On the top is the existing, showing the existing stairway and service entrance, along with 10 existing rear fence supports that will be removed. On the bottom is a proposed plan where you can see circled the location of the new loading gate on the left that will align with the existing service passageway and the new service gate at the existing entrance location. This will also have 4 new rear fence supports on 2-inch fence posts. Next. Here we have a photo of the existing fence at the east end of the building with the ironwork at the neighboring buildings for context. Please note that the existing fence is 7 foot 2. Next. When considering the design for the new fence, we looked at existing ironwork on the building. This is an existing window grills on Park Avenue that we look to replicate the existing design elements from at the top and at the bottom. Next. There's also an existing service gate on Park Avenue on the other side of the building between 829 and 823 Park Avenue, which we looked at as a reference, along with the existing tree pit guards shown here with the existing fence on North East 76th Street. Next. We also looked at ironwork at nearby buildings and historical districts for context. Here are some photos of the fences at below grade area wise at 25 East 78th Street and 28 East 78th Street across the street and 36 East 67th Street, showing similar in height fences and a Renaissance revival ornamentation. Next. Here we have details of the proposed new loading gate and elevation and in section, the existing fence on the left and the proposed loading gate on the right in front of the existing passageway entrance. Next. Here we have details of the existing and proposed service gate and elevation and section at the existing service gate location. Existing on the left and the proposed on the right. Next. Here we have existing and proposed spacing and design details for the fence and elevation and section. You can see the matching design details from the window grills in the center. Next. And here we have section details for the existing and proposed fence supports, the largest and center support on the left and the highest support by Park Avenue on the right. Next. Here we have a rendering of the proposed fence. On the top are photos of the existing fence showing the step down fence panels. And at the bottom is the rendering showing the proposed conditions with the linear edge on top. Next. Here we have a rendering of the proposed fence at the easternmost corner. On the left, a photo of the existing fence in front of the passageway. And on the right is a rendering of the proposed conditions with the loading gate in front of the passageway and the new coping stone on top. Next. Here's a proposed rendering of the fence seen from the westernmost point on Park Avenue with the return. On the left is the photo of the existing, and on the right is the proposed with the coping stone again on the top of the existing base. And that concludes our presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions? Yes, Commissioner Ginsburg.
Is there any reason the existing fence needs to be taken down? Is it deteriorated to a point it can't be repaired?
I mean, from the looks of it, there's just all the conditions of the fence are actually pretty like deteriorated. Like even the connections going into the granite, they just don't seem to be holding on together too much. So
I don't know. I also think the other conditions, people building there, when you're walking down the street.
Yeah,
Can you
state your name also?
The conditions of
And-
the existing.
I'm sorry,
fence-
please state your name.
My name is Rob Hegedus, Allen Kilcoyne Architects. I think the main consideration of the replacement of this fence has to do with the sawtooth effect. And it's actually exaggerated as you go up and down the sidewalk. So the owners were thinking to continue that straight line instead of the sawtooth to make a bit more in keeping with the adjacent ironwork.
All right, thank you. And other questions, Commissioner Chu?
Yeah, I get, my only question is there, when I look at the proposed, which does say it's gonna show more of the building at the consistent horizontal, which I appreciate. The thing I do notice is the posts. I'm just wondering how this is being built. Are they sections of 15 feet? How are they?
yeah, they're 15 and 6.
Okay, so basically your stanchions, how did you locate them? Based purely on dimension, or do they relate to the stepping of the granite?
No, there are some parts of the building that stick out. We kind of wanted to align them for the most part with that, but just evenly spacing them out. They're not going around it. The only odd part was where we had the loading gate, the service entrance.
You have to put one at either end of the hinge, right?
Right.
Because I was just looking at the detail of the existing ironwork on the window that you show. So beautiful how they basically took two halves and joined them with the minimal support. If you look at where they break the panels, there's 3 panels where they join. They just took 2 thin halves and joined them to a support back. And that's just to diminish the effect of the post. Is that at all something you looked at? Is that possible?
I believe it is possible, if there's a feeling that we can reduce the vertical post similar to what the existing condition is. I'm sure that's possible.
Okay.
All right, other questions? Right, we'll move to public testimony. Is there anyone in the room who would like to speak on this item? All right, noting that there isn't, we'll turn it over to Gregory Kala to see if we have any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We have a couple of remote participants with their hands raised. The first we'll be hearing from is Zainab Turan from the Friends of the Upper East Side. Zainab Turan, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you. Hello again, commissioners. My name is Zainab Turan, speaking on behalf of Friends of the Upper East Side. Friends Preservation Committee commends the applicants on their proposal and improvement over the existing tall and discordant stepped railings that line the building areaway along East 76th Street. The constant height of the proposed railing introduces a harmonious balance to the areaway, and we appreciate the effort to replicate the pattern of existing ironwork to the building in the design of the new railing. We do not object to the removal of a small section of the existing granite curb in order to install a delivery gate at grade. Thank you, commissioners.
Next up, we'll be hearing from Christina Conroy from the Victorian Society of New York. Christina Conroy, I'm promoting you to the panelist. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Christina Conroy for the Victorian Society, New York. The Victorian Society questions whether these changes proposed for a low granite areaway wall and metal fencing are the most appropriate way to treat 100-plus-year-old historic elements. We think that the existing simple stepped fence is a better solution than varying the fence height, which changes the proportion at each step. The more ornate fences on the presentation boards are actually seen on the primary facade areaways, whereas the 292 Park areaway is along the north side elevation. We believe the decorative features proposed for the new fence are taken from non-historic ironwork on the building. The project would also introduce an extra line of non-historic coping material to the granite curb wall. This added coping piece appears to be related to the proposed new fence. This would create an extra horizontal joint, which diminishes the effect of the monolithic granite base. This thin layer of granite pierced by fence posts is not likely to be durable, and adding new material on top of the existing old granite with its weathered edges is likely to be visually unsuccessful. The site visits shows that the granite fence to be in good condition. We ask the commissioners to consider whether scraping and painting it is a better solution than replacement of this historic fence. Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I do not see any additional hands raised, so I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 8 recommends approval. And with that, I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
All right, thank you. Would you like to respond to the comments we've heard?
I think the introduction, I think the existing sawtooth fence actually does not help the existing conditions of the visual of the building. Lowering the fence, the building is it's more open area. The building is more visual. The existing granite coping that we are doing to match to the existing fence is required. The existing fence posts are rusted into the existing granite coping. If a coping was not added, any repairs or replacements or removals to fix those previous fence locations would rust over time. The reason for our new granite coping is one, to have a clean surface and also hide the fence posts for the new installation.
Without the fence, it goes to last night.
Okay. All right. Do you have any knowledge of how old the fence is?
We believe it's probably original to the building.
Okay. Right, commissioners, any other questions? All right, let's close our hearing. Commissioner Chu, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
So second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed and we have this proposal to replace a fence we believe may be original. It is however, a non-decorative fence, and to replace it with a lower fence that would be straight run across the entire facade where the sidewalk slopes down. So it would be 4 feet at one end and ultimately sort of maintain the height at the other end, eliminating the steps. And the design is picking up elements from other ironwork found on the building. So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Lutfi, would you like to start this one? Sure.
I have to say, I think this is a very nice project. I think, it's now going to be visually, I think, cleaner and more uniform to have a fence that is at one height. And I think the elements of the building, of the fencing elements that are being picked up and applied to this new fence are actually going to make it decorative in a very attractive, understated way. I think it's going to be a nicer fence with a little more weight to it. That won't, though, in any way detract from the building itself. And it's going to relate to, fencing within the area. So I think that works. I think the granite capping looks very clean. So I think it's a very good project.
Thank you. Commissioner Chu?
Yeah, I think that it's a pretty straightforward proposal. I personally I don't mind the existing fence because it is very minimal and clean. There's no interruptions. It just keeps flowing, and that's what I like about it. I see that the intent is there on the proposed. I would want the applicant to work with the staff on the posts because as Commissioner Lupney just mentioned, it is a slightly heavier look than the existing one, which has a very light feel to it. But otherwise, it seems reasonable what's being proposed. It seems a lot of it is just maintaining the condition of an existing guardrail.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
I agree. I think the original fence has a certain lightness to it, which is quite beautiful. It's a heavy building and then there's a light fence. The new one has a heavy base and a heavy intermediate top and has its own properties that are beautiful too. So.
Okay. Commissioner Goldblum?
I'm okay with this proposal. I think it's appropriate as is. I do have a little bit of concern about the granite copings being, it's such a kind of heavy monolithic piece of stone or series of stones. I'm a little concerned about matching and having it to feel thinner or less substantial, but I can accept it as is. I think that if that staff works on that, if it seems like it's necessary or logical, I don't think for aesthetic reasons it's really imperative to do it, and I'd suggest they avoid it if they can, but I'd leave it to staff's discretion.
Okay. Commissioner Ginsburg?
I think I'm in the minority here. This is what we think is original historic fabric. Doesn't seem like it can't be repaired and if needed, occasionally modified. So I don't know why a new fence needs to be put here, and I'd keep the original.
Okay. All right, so, and I think, for me, just while it may be original, it is non-decorative. So like sometimes when we approve other elements, the replacement of other elements like fire escapes, for example, if they're non-decorative, we will approve removing them. So I think in terms of the fact that it's non-decorative and non-designed, and that the new fence will actually expose more of the building's facade, in this case, I can find that the new fence is appropriate to the building. It's typical of fences that would be found at this age and style. But I think we are left with 5 commissioners, and Commissioner Wellington, unless we can bring you up to speed, it's a large apartment building on a corner, and the sidewalk on the side facade, where there's an areaway fence that steps with the slope of the sidewalk, and they are proposing to replace it. They believe it's original. It's simply designed. You can see photos of it there, and you can see it steps down with the grade, and the proposal is to take the high point on the lowest, where the lowest point of the sidewalk is, sort of maintain that height and make it go straight across, so it becomes only 4 feet high at the other end. And it would be a decorative metal fire escape that picks up elements from the facade, and a new cast stone coping where there's rust from the existing fence. So if you've been
Yeah, I read about this case along with others last night. So I have no problem with the majority's decision. I apologize because this morning's sentencing, you cannot sentence a defendant without defendant being in the court, and he was almost 2 hours late. That's why I just rushed over as soon as he was sentenced for 30 years to life.
Thank you very much. Wow. Good. I know. We appreciate your coming here. I know that was probably very distressing this morning to be witness to, but we appreciate your being here and in the nick of time. So I think we can do a motion to approve it and ask them to work with the staff on the width of the posts.
Excuse me. Docket 24-10852, 829 Park Avenue, Upper East Side Historic District, a neoclassical style apartment building designed by Pickering and Walker and built in 1910, 1911. The application is to modify an areaway wall and replace fencing. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Upper East Side Historic District extension. I recommend approval. Finding that the replacement of the modern fence will not eliminate or damage any significant architectural features of the building or site, that the elimination of the current stepped fence condition will introduce a unified level fence design and will be consistent with the profiles of typical fencing found at some apartment buildings with areaways in this historic district, and the new height will relate well proportionately to the facade beyond. That the proposed details of the fence design will recall the historic window grills, that the proposed gates and hardware within the fencing will be typical in terms of number, spacing, and width, that the proposed granite capping will help conceal holes at the existing granite curbing associated with the proposed fencing replacement and will otherwise blend with the current condition, and that the work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the building or the historic district. I recommend that the applicant work with staff on the width of the fence posts.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chu, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right.
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Chu.
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg.
Yay.
Commissioner Goldblum. Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
6 in favor, 1 opposed. The motion passes.
That's approved. Thank you. We'll move to the next item.
We're going to jump to our public meeting agenda and do public meeting item number 1 to start, LPC 24-08557. This is an application for certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 848, Lot 1. 119 Fifth Avenue in the Ladies Mile Historic District, a neo-Renaissance style store loft building designed by John H. Duncan and built in 1905 to 06. The application is to install full-height partitions and vitrines at storefront display windows. This was read into the record. Public hearing of July 16th, 2024. It was not presented at that time, so we'll be seeing it for the first time today, and we'll review that once we open the hearing.
Okay, well, let's open up the hearing. Commissioner Goldblum, would you make a motion to open up the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the hearing is open and the applicant may begin.
Okay, commissioners, the applicant has entered the hearing and will be presenting remotely. Matt, you now have control of the presentation. You can advance the slides using your arrow keys or your mouse. Please state your name for the record and you may begin.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, commissioners and landmark staff. I want to start by thanking you for your time today. I'm Matt Hyatt. I'm an architect with Bergmeyer. We are the architects for this project. I believe that I am joined by Peter Liu, our client from Sephora, although I can't see the full arrangement of folks in attendance. Our project, if I can get this to advance, is located at, let's see, where am I here? (119) Fifth Avenue. It's the corner of Fifth Avenue and East 19th Street. On the right-hand side of this image, you see the tax photo from 1940. This is a project that is really an interior renovation to the Sephora store, but it has impact on the visibility through the storefront windows. So these are some existing conditions, elevations of the surrounding streets. Again, our property is 119, so this elevation on this run of photographs and this portion of the elevation on this run of photographs. The project does not change the existing storefront or glazing. That is all intact. As I mentioned, this is really an interior change. So what we are proposing is a visible change to what is displayed within and through the glass. So these are some existing conditions photos. And on this photo, which is a view of the front entrance to the store, we did Photoshop out the signage pillars so you could see better what is being proposed. Is actually not a change of the storefront of the glass, but what is visible beyond. And as I show on a larger plane, you may see it better. But there is a system of supports to hang graphics of 19 inches back from the glass. And then beyond that, there is, in this case, a column, but on the opposite corner, more of a surface that's going to be visible. Next one. So on the upper left hand, that's the existing condition. The primary storefront windows on the left of that photo have graphics just up on the inside of the glass. And just to the right of those are 3 windows which look into the double height space. Those 3 windows have been filmed over with some striped graphics. Above those are 3 windows that look into the same double height space, which are currently and will remain completely transparent. The photo on the bottom left is actually the proposal. So where there are graphics applied to the backside of the glass today, those will be replaced by a surface setback, in this case, about 3 feet, 5 inches. You'll see this on a plan in a moment from the glazing, and then some suspended graphics that will change over time. The back surface, which is essentially the back of what will appear like a vitrine, will get a black and white horizontal stripe, which is part of the Sephora brand signature. This is an elevation describing, again, the aspect of what I just took you through, with graphics being replaced from on the glass to graphics suspended from the ceiling behind the glass with a backdrop, which is, in this case, the column. And in this case, a wall surface, which is backing up some internal store fixturing. The proposal for the 3 windows, my cursor, the 3 windows here is to remove, as I mentioned, the black and white film, and instead to paint what is essentially going to be a vitrine interior black, and then to film the glass. The hope is that that then changes the figure-ground relationship, and the opening is more clearly visible than it has been as a striped graphic, given the coursing of the stone on either side of those windows. This is probably the clearest depiction of the work. Again, from the main entrance, what you're seeing through to is just a little bit of a column, which will have the black and white wall covering on it, and then there'll be a graphic suspended in front of that. And then along this portion where my cursor is moving, that is visible from the street. You'll see through, so there'll be graphics hanging, as I mentioned, about 19 inches back. Hard to see here, but 19 inches back with a backdrop of the black and white wall covering beyond. And then these are the three windows that are more or less at sidewalk level, slightly above eye level. And those will have the black painted interior vitrine with the film on the glass. The windows above, as I mentioned, will remain clear. We did include a few precedents. They're not necessarily direct precedents given the nature of what we're doing here. This is a CVS in the district that has a storefront where the interior fixtures back up to and create a visibility blockage within. This one, you do see, there's a person here and there's a person here. You get a sense for the scale. The top of the fixtures is more or less or eye level when you can see above that and into the store. We have a similar condition, but a much steeper angle of sight into the interior ceiling of the space. And then the second precedent is true vitrine, full height, fully enclosed, more like display boxes with vignettes in them. Again, not what we're specifically proposing, but in this case, this is a full blockage of the view inside. We will actually, from the sidewalk level, still maintain a bit of view up and over the backdrop and into the ceiling space at the corner. And then where the three windows are fully filmed, I mentioned there are windows above, and you'll still be able, as you do today, to see into the lighting and ceiling systems in that space. And that is the last of our slides. I'm happy to go to any of these in the presentation you would like.
Right. Any questions, commissioners? Commissioner Ginsburg.
This may be more for staff. I thought anything more than 19 inches back wasn't in our purview.
That
So
used to be the case, and then we adopted rules was it in the 2019 package where we determine in the rules, we now have a rule that addresses installations that are 18 inches behind the glass, that more than 18 inches behind the glass, that are full partition. I'll let Corey answer it actually.
Yeah, it's more based off of, does the installation sort of encase a window? And that in which case, if it were deeper than that, it could still have the effect of blocking all sort of vision in and out of the space. Or for something that may be freestanding like a vitrine, is it of such a size, even if back further than 18 inches, that it again kind of crowds out most of the opening itself. So some of the signage rules are also sort of based upon that. And if they're installed on top of these partitions or vitrines, that comes into play. So it's within the last few years that we did adopt a different stance on that.
Okay, any other questions? Yeah.
I'm just
Commissioner
wondering.
Lutfi. Go ahead.
Thank you. What's going to be behind those windows that are being covered?
It's just a void space, which is why we are opting to film them rather than creating additional displays.
And then the front on East 19th Street, the new displays, they're going to be set back.
Correct. Yeah, what you're seeing in the view here, there is a face, which is a suspended graphic, and then there is a end of a fabricated column. It's not a structural column. That's this black rectangle that you see here. So the black and white wall covering wraps around that, and so you're seeing just a bit of it.
So, right. And so then in general, with the new design, how much visibility is there into the store? Not much.
The section is probably, I'm going to flip to that, is probably the best depiction of that. So this is the sidewalk level, obviously, and the height of a person is probably here. So from the sidewalk level looking horizontally, it blocks it. But if you look at the top of the wall is here, and the clear glass transom under the awning is here. So from the sidewalk, you would still be able to see up and to the ceiling and lighting system. Again, similar to that CVS precedent, and also similar to the transom windows, if you will, on the other portion of this space where you see up to the ceiling and lighting today. So you'll know when the business is open and see that the lights are on.
Right, the ceiling. Okay, thank you.
All right, and I think a representative from Sephora is in the Zoom, and if you'd like to speak, please feel free to go ahead and speak at this time. Just make sure you're unmuted and you can go ahead and speak.
I don't really have anything to say. I think Matt did a pretty good job presenting our case.
Oops. Can you speak a little louder and closer maybe to the microphone?
Oh, sorry. I was saying that I didn't have anything else to add, and I think Matt did a good job presenting our case. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh.
He said he didn't have anything to add.
I don't quite understand the proposal in that plan that was just brought up. Could you bring back the plan that we just had?
Yes, do I still have control?
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
Interestingly, I don't. Yeah, the arrow advance key is not working for me. It's page 8. Are you able to move to page 8? Well, actually, it wouldn't be page 8 now. You've got a master document. There it is.
There.
Yeah.
So
there are two elements of the store that are part of the change. The first is the red area, which is part of the retail product assortment. So those are full height display fixtures with the full range of products that the customers expect in a Sephora. And then the part in green is actually beauty services, where there are staff members to help folks identify makeup solutions and connect them with the right cosmetics. So those two elements, because of what they are, the mirrors for the beauty services and the full height nature of the retail fixtures, create a need to have a solid wall along the street edge. So we're looking to treat the back of that in two different ways, depending on the size and scale of the windows that we're looking at in the elevations.
So essentially, you need to block out all the windows on the up page side and the corner one on the upper right.
That's correct. The one on the corner adjacent to the entrance is sort of less blocked, if you will, because it's really just the column. But
I saw a graphic proposed to be put in front of it, though, on the corner.
Yeah, yes, the graphic is large. It's not quite as large as the solid wall around the corner, but yes, I get your point for sure.
All right, thank you. This is a question for us. I just don't, in terms of past approvals for proposals for the windows, I mean, the example of the Harry Potter store was raised as well as a traditional latrine where they decorate it, they display. It used to be a beautiful thing that everyone wanted to see. That's something that we obviously have in the city and have approved those approaches. In a case like this, where I assume the red is completely blocked out, they're all completely blocked, and they're being painted dark with a film on the glass, so you essentially don't see anymore.
Right, those are
no sense of
three
depth.
lower windows.
And then the three corner to the retail are being covered with a solid background, and then float a hanging sign in front to give it a depth perception, I'm guessing.
That's correct.
Right, so the 3 display windows have essentially a partition behind it with a
Right.
graphic on it and then a sign in front of
In
that.
front
And I
of
think
them.
it's hard to, because you can't see the signs in the
Yeah.
plan drawing, so it's hard to understand if there's dimensionality to those signs that are hanging, the
And those are
pictures.
printed, fixed, they're not digital, they're just fixed images that hang.
That's correct. It's a single line in the section about midway in the depth of that space.
So the other thing is you were making a point about how the partition behind the backdrop wasn't full height, but it looks like it's full height. Maybe the section.
Yep.
In section, I guess there's a few inches that are lower than the awning.
I think he said you could see the ceiling.
You could see through over it.
Just
Yeah.
Okay.
In
Up
pure
to the ceiling.
elevation, the
Okay.
lines with the bottom edge of the awning, but in perspective view from the sidewalk,
Right.
you will see that deep space above.
You're lower, then you can look up. Okay, I get you. Thank you.
All right, and just on the subject of the vitrine versus partition, and I think, as we sort of explained, we didn't used to regulate anything that was beyond 18 inches, and we did adopt the rules to allow for staff level approval, sort of assuming jurisdiction of these things that are deeper in the space. And a partition can be approved at staff level if you can see around it. And we had a similar conversation when we saw the LED signs the other day, a couple weeks ago. So there's a staff level approval if you can see around the partition and still have a view into the store space. But the commission has approved more solid vitrines on buildings that were maybe historically department stores and Corey, I don't know if you want to speak to the differences a little bit more.
Well, I mean, I think the Harry Potter store was mentioned as an example, and that had a number of storefronts. So I think there's often been somewhat of a balance where there are still some display windows, not just entrance door bays, display windows, which were much more transparent or weren't blocked at all, sort of an exchange or to balance out those that were being blocked entirely. So I think that's what's often considered. Is,
Right. The number of the percentage of the bays that are obscured. Exactly. Question? Okay. Let's move to public testimony and then we'll come back. Is there anyone in the room who would like to speak on this item? Not seeing anyone, I'm going to turn it over to Gregory to see if we have any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We have one hand raised among our remote participants, that being John Graham from the Victorian Society of New York. John Graham, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. Please unmute your line and say your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Graham for the Victorian Society of New York. We're not quite sure what the issues are based on this presentation. There's a long-standing historic precedent for placement of partitions behind storefront windows and blocking views to the inside of the store. In fact, for some types of stores, like department stores, there's never visibility into the store. Vitrines are almost now universal. Appropriateness is determined by what's inside those vitrines. Signs directly on the glass need to be minimal. The signs proposed here are too big. They need to be restricted in size. LED panels in historic districts are especially problematic. They're unlike any historic sign, and their brightness, motion, and graphics can easily overwhelm the storefront, building, and street. More insidiously, they're a poor substitute for creative and artistic window displays that depend on style rather than bright lights and quick motions to catch the eye. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I do not see any additional hands raised, so I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 5 recommends approval. And with that, I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Thank you. So I'd like to ask the applicant if you'd like to respond to the comments we've heard in testimony.
Just the one, we are not proposing LED panels. I'm not sure if there's a errant note in the presentation, but these are printed fixed graphics. And if there are size limitations or guidelines as a percentage of open glazing area, we were not aware of that. But if there are guidelines dictating proportional size, we could certainly adhere to that.
All right, commissioners, any final questions? Do you have a question? Yes, Commissioner Jefferson. Oh, okay. All right. If there are no final questions, then we'll move to our discussion. So Commissioner Jefferson, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So move.
Thank you. And Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, hearing's closed. And so this is a proposal for a partition behind the windows that for the three small windows would have a film on it, the grayscale film, to block the view. And then at the three display windows, you would see either on the two display windows, you would see the face of the partition. At the third window around the corner, you'd see the end of the partition. And in both cases, there are printed signs hanging in front of them. So Commissioner Ginsburg, would you like to start this one?
Well, I'm concerned that the view is into this store is being too heavily blocked. And so I would suggest some reduction in the wall size and in the screens in the front, in the three windows at the front corner be worked on with staff. Besides that, I think it's reasonable, but just giving some ability to see in.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chen?
I share the same sentiment. I'm wondering whether in some areas they can lower the height. I think, the question is, so working with staff, I'm sure they can work it out.
Okay, Commissioner Lutfi?
If they work with staff, it's acceptable, but it's unacceptable. And yeah, I think the information that was provided to us is not analogous. If you look at the CVS windows, you can, even though they have signs, right on the glass, there's pretty complete visibility into those spaces. And likewise with the Harry Potter, there was a balance of vitrines that were closed and decorative and, helped tell a story. And there were windows and that were open. So I feel like and when I think of Sephora stores in general in New York, I don't think of them being closed up in this way. So I appreciate the fact that those three back windows, it's traditional for those off the street to be blocked. But then when you think about the whole thing in totality, it's like a mass of, invisibility into the space. So, I'm going to be a little flexible here and say, working with staff that, to provide like the kind of visibility we've asked other applicants to provide to us, I can approve this.
All right, Commissioner Chu?
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I think that even from my perspective, I can accept more of the red zone on the left, but I would say the three windows that are clearly architecturally storefront for transparency into the interior, I would like to see a great reduction of the opacity there. It's interesting, the tradition of vitrines and windows to be a value to the retail owner and to display and to celebrate those views is a bit gone. It seems like it's more a nuisance because of interior planning. I wish you could really celebrate those moments and I think that in some ways that draws more attention to your store and what's going on inside.
Okay, Commissioner Jefferson?
I agree with both my commissioners. I think a balance is important. And I agree with Commissioner Drew that the front part should have a different kind of attitude and the side should have a different type of attitude. And I would leave it to the staff to decide how to break that up.
Okay. And Commissioner Goldblum.
I agree with the other commissioners.
Okay, so I think we can do a motion to approve this with the recommendation that they reduce the size to provide some view
Right.
in consultation with the staff.
With regards to LPC 24-08557, 119 Fifth Avenue, Ladies Mile Historic District, a neo-Renaissance style store and loft building designed by John H. Duncan and built in 1905-6. Application is to install a full height partition and vitrines at storefront display windows. I note that the building style, scale, material, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Ladies Mile District. That the work will not damage or eliminate any significant architectural features. That the 3 pair of smaller windows at the East 119th Street facade are not traditional storefront display windows and are located in a visually distinct area of the facade, therefore are installing partitions behind the windows and translucent grayscale film at the glazing will not diminish the overall level of transparency of the storefront at the commercial ground floor. And that the partitions behind the display windows at the storefront at the corner of Fifth Avenue and East 119th Street will be set back from the glazing, maintaining a level of depth and transparency into the storefront consistent with the use of display vitrines often found in commercial ground floor storefronts on buildings of this type. However, I find that the creation of full height partitions at 3 of the 4 storefront bays combined with interior graphics is excessive and significantly diminishes the transparency of the commercial ground floor, especially when seen in prominent corner views of the building. Therefore, I recommend working with staff that the partitions on the Fifth Avenue facade and/or partitions at the easternmost pair of display windows at the East 119th Street be removed from the scope of work or reduced.
Be reduced. Okay. And Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second.
John, will you call?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi. 7 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
Okay, thank you. And commissioners, we're going to try to do one more of these public meeting items before we break. Okay.
Thank you all.
Right. Public meeting item number 2, LPC 24-08332, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, Block 259, Lot 57, 48 Willow Place in the Brooklyn Heights Historic District. This is a modern style house designed by Joseph Mertz, built in 1965. The application is to legalize the installation of a fence without LPC permits. This was read into the record of the public hearing of July 16th, 2024. It'll be presented for the first time today after we open the hearing.
All right, thank you. So let's open up the hearing. Commissioner Chen, would you make a motion to open up the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, the applicant may begin.
Hello, afternoon. My name is Ian Starling, Principal of Starling Architecture. I appreciate the opportunity to present in front of this committee. I was architect for the renovation of 48 Willow Place in Brooklyn. Actually, could I get the first slide? Sorry.
You can go ahead and advance the slides.
Okay, excellent. Cool. So I was the architect for the renovation of 48 Willow Place in Brooklyn Heights, and I believe 48 Willow is truly one of the most unique houses in all of the city. Having the honor to work as the architect for this renovation was the highlight of my career to date. And 48 Willow is one of 3 mid-century modern homes on Willow Place designed by Joseph and Mary Mertz in the mid-1960s. It was the home Joseph and Mary lived in with their family until my clients purchased it in 2020. I'm in awe of and have great respect for the Mertz's bold designs for these 3 homes, especially in the context of Brooklyn Heights. For every aspect of our renovation, we sought to do justice to the original design and thought of our design work in dialogue with the Mertz's masterpiece. 48 Willows on the northwest corner of Willow Place and State Street in Brooklyn, in the Brooklyn Heights Historic District. We propose to legalize the as-built fence condition on the State Street elevation of 48 Willow Place. The previous fence was rotten and falling over and presented an immediate safety and security risk. Consequently, the existing fence was replaced in the summer of 2023 as an emergency measure. The slat language of the original design was replicated exactly as built, but the height of the slats was extended to the full height of the fence, and the chicken wire and bamboo cells at the top of the fence were eliminated for security and additional privacy. As you can see in these three images from the three MERS houses, 48, 40, and 44, all of the, slats are exactly the same. And we replicated them in material and in pattern and scale. And as you can see also in these three images, whenever the slats are screening something in the MERS houses, they always went full height in terms of what they were screening. And the fence that was replaced was basically, something that was added to over time and created. Sorry about that. Another notable thing about the MERS houses in general, or the MERS's house in general, was their openness to kind of evolving, using the house as a laboratory for their design ideas over time. And, in this image, which is of the backyard, you can see sort of the design of the yard changing over time. And there were like notable changes made, like the bay window in the right image was not there when the house was originally built. And this is something that was sort of supported by some testimony, a letter that Katie MERS, the daughter of Mary and Joseph MERS, sent in support of our fence redesign, saying that it was sort of appropriate, and her parents, really did appreciate sort of the house as a laboratory and use it to kind of forward their architectural ideas. These images here are a number of views of the house over time. You can see some notable changes to sort of the State Street facade. There were two windows added, in addition to sort of the fence just evolving over time. Initially, it was sort of very low, and then in 88, you'll see in a subsequent elevation that they added some height towards the back. And then when my clients purchased the house, the MERS's had added these, chicken wire and bamboo cells at the top of the lower portion. All of these changes were kind of executed to enhance sort of the privacy and security of the site over time, which was a big concern with my clients. Some views from the corner of State Street and Willow Place showing the fence the existing fence, and then the fence that was built. In elevation with the two fences, sort of restoring the slat languages, but then also the original finish. A close-up of the garage area. And garage area again showing some deterioration. This is the LPC approved drawing from 1988 showing the fence being extended above the garage and a trellis added. This plan was executed, and then subsequently they added these, cells on top of the lower part of the fence for security and privacy. And then this is our design for the fence. Like I said, sort of extending the slats all the way up. And then a section from the southern side of State Street looking into the yard, and just seeing the relationship of the existing backyard, which is at the ground level at Willow Place, but then drops off at State Street. The low fence, you could obviously see, have very clear views into the backyard, into the house, and see people there. So the desire for, elevating the fence in the back to kind of create that additional privacy was very important and important to maintain with the new design. And this is the detail of the fence that we inherited, and showing sort of the modulation of the slat pattern and the chicken wire and bamboo above. And then this is the garage. And then our as-built details, just showing the slat language from the garage extended all the way across. And one other thing just to mention is that in addition to replicating the slats, we did add a solid plywood panel, just finished exactly the same as the wood on the exterior to create additional security or privacy and security in the backyard. That's it.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes, Commissioner Chu.
What was it 88, the LPC approved?
Yeah, my understanding was that this was actually built just prior to designation, but there may have been a application subsequent to designation for the alterations to the fence. Right. Karina, maybe you can.
This was just for the facade alteration at the window. I'm not sure, we didn't approve anything at the fence, so I'm not sure. My understanding was this was the original composition.
Okay, so the building and the fence were constructed prior to designation. Post designation, we approved facade alterations. This was shown as the existing condition. So sometime subsequent to that, the Mertzes, I guess, put the privacy panels on top. And so without permits.
It did not get a permit. Yeah. So the bamboo cells did not have a permit from LPC. That was.
And then the whole thing was rebuilt.
Yes.
Yes.
And
which
so
is
we're
what
looking
we-
after that.
Got
What they're applying for now.
it. Okay.
And so that's right. So the original architect added the privacy panels on top without permits, but continued his fence across. And the current owners replaced that with a new fence in the original design and carried the slat design at that same height all the way across.
One thing I also just wanted to point out from our earliest picture of the house taken by the Merzes, the fence was at the lower datum for the whole, if you see on the left side, sorry. You see on the left side here, I can kind of zoom in maybe.
That's the low.
This was low, the original, right
Then
after
the- then-
completion.
Then it was raised up just where the gate is.
Exactly. And then they
And then
raised the.
all the way across. And then the current owners matched that final height. So can you speak to the fences that you see at the ends of blocks? I mean, I think that's the thing it's most comparable to.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the, immediate context on State Street. I know that there are two houses, one on the, I guess, the next block towards Henry, and then one past Henry that have very similar sort of tall wooden fences. The actual fence height itself isn't that high. It's just because State Street slopes so much. You have the concrete retaining wall and then the fence on top of it. So when you're in the backyard, the scale of the fence isn't actually that high and is not out of line, I would say, with the other fences in the area.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's move to testimony, and I'll note that there's no one in the room to speak on this item, so I will turn it over to Gregory to see if we have any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. If you'd like to speak on this item, please click the raise hand button now so I can call on you. I see that Judy Stanton from the Brooklyn Heights Association is in the room. Judy Stanton, if you would like to speak on this item, please click the raise hand button. Okay. There we go. So, Judy Stanton, I will be promoting you to panelist right now. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
I'm unmuted. Judy Stanton speaking for the Brooklyn Heights Association. We support this application as presented. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I do not see any additional hands raised, so I will note for the record that Brooklyn Community Board 2 recommends approval, and we also received a letter from an individual recommending approval. And with that, I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Thank you. And I think the letter is probably Joseph Mercett's daughter. Is that
Yes, that's
right?
correct.
Recommending approval. Okay. All right, commissioners, any final questions? All right, let's move to our discussion. Commissioner Chen, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the hearing's closed and we'll begin our discussion. As we have had just now a long discussion about the chronology of this house, one of actually 3 houses that are rather beloved in Brooklyn Heights, and but are not 19th century or just built in the 1960s, just prior to designation, and originally had a lower fence. The architect raised that fence over time, and the new owners have just replaced that fence to match the existing height, which is comparable to other garden fence heights, and also matching the plank design and the slat design and extending it all the way across. Commissioner Goldblum, would you like to start this one?
Sure. This is such a great set of houses.
Yes, I know.
So creative.
yes.
I mean, I wish we could claim credit for them, but we can't.
Very well
Just
proportioned.
good architecture. Very interesting kind of Kantian
Yes.
textualism. Very, very appropriate and kind of just really just contributes to this the fascination of that district. And it's really great. And I think that the fence in question is appropriate in that it restores in a way the uniformity of line that the original architect intended, as was shown in the photograph. So I think it's totally appropriate.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Ginsburg?
Appropriate.
Okay. Commissioner Chen?
I agree. I really love the details, and I think it's very nicely done.
Right. Commissioner Lutfi?
Agree.
Commissioner Chu?
I agree, but it's one issue of the scale of it. I mean, that high is a problem, but it's a beautiful fence.
Okay. All right, great. So I think we have a consensus to approve. Commissioner Goldblum, would you make the motion?
Regarding 48 Willow Place, in the Brooklyn Heights Historic District, the application is to legalize the installation of a fence without LPC permits. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details of the building are among the features for which contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Brooklyn Heights Historic District. I recommend approval, finding the removal of the historic wood fence in front of the rear yard and garage along State Street was warranted due to its deteriorated condition. The presence of mesh panels at the upper portion of the historic fence was a later alteration, and the taller height of the fence does not substantially obscure any significant architectural features of the rear facade. It is in keeping with fences and garden walls found at corner buildings within the district. That the new wood fence, consisting of solid wood panels recessed from the projecting pickets, is in keeping with the material, design, and details of the previous historic fence, and that the work does not detract from the special architectural or historic character of the building or the Brooklyn Heights Historic District.
Thank you. And Commissioner Ginsburg, would you second that motion?
Second.
John, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
7 in favor, none opposed. The motion passes.
That's approved. Thank you. All right, we're going to break for lunch. We'll come back at 1:25. We'll ask all members of the public to voluntarily exit the Zoom meeting at this time so that should you wish to return, you don't have technical difficulties that would arise if we remove you. And we will see everybody at 1:25. Thank you.